the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Alex. She's back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. It's Good Friday. And welcome to Talk. Lots to get through this afternoon. Did you see Marks and Spencer's have had a right old pop at Sadiq Khan as soft on crime after staff were attacked, of course, during that retail violence and those recent Clapham riots. We're going to look at the wider question here of lawlessness Britain. What's behind the story? What is the root cause of lawlessness in this country? We'll have details on that. Also, oil prices surging again amid the Iran war tensions, with Brent crude jumping nearly 9%, fuel costs spiking, diesel up 30%, and petrol at a 2-year high. I can't remember it being that high just 2 years ago, but that's the way it is. We'll look at that story. And outgoing chairman of the BBC, or outgoing Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, admits the BBC's culture won't be fully fixed as fresh scandals pile pressure ahead of a leadership shake-up. What will the BBC look like in the years to come? We'll have more on that story as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Now, what is the root cause of lawlessness Britain? There's a question. Where do you point the finger? Where do you begin the process of analysing and concluding when it went? Is there a point when it went wrong? Is there a demonstrable and tangible tipping point where it all went pear-shaped? Britain sometimes feels like we're auditioning for a low-budget heist movie, except no one really is in charge of the script. Shoplifting has become so casual, it's practically a self-checkout alternative. Mobile phones are snatched with Olympic efficiency, and the phrase, "the police won't attend," has entered everyday conversation like the weather. In fact, it's highly unusual to see or hear this these days.
Get down! Get on the floor! Yeah? Okay? Mate, you're under arrest, okay, for shoplifting. You don't have to say anything, mate. Harm your face. You don't mention one question to you later on in court. Mate. Come on. Come here. Give me your hands.
I'm not resisting. I apologise, bro. I'm sorry.
And how often do we see that? Rarely. You're under arrest for shoplifting. We see those cops, the exasperated police chiefs, shrugging on breakfast TV, explaining priorities while teenagers live stream themselves looting corner shops. Meanwhile, politicians deliver those firm-sounding statements that somehow evaporate by lunchtime. Government action often feels like one of those strongly worded emails, drafted, admired, but never actually sent. And even city leaders like Sadiq Khan find themselves juggling these narratives, balancing reassurance with the undeniable sense that things are, well, a little bit frayed around the edges. The Mayor of London, an obvious example, however, says that everything is tickety-boo.
We're far safer than all the major cities in Europe and every city in the United States of America. Burglaries down, gun crime is down, knife crime is down, 10,000 fewer victims of mobile phone thefts as well.
There is a peculiar business to all of this, of course. Polite outrage, mild sarcasm, and then, well, just carry on. But beneath the humour lies a sharper truth. When everyday crime becomes a background noise, we have a massive problem. And that is where we're at, because lawlessness, interestingly, isn't always dramatic. It's actually quite subtle. It's cumulative. It's the moment people stop expecting consequences. And once that happens, restoring order is far harder to maintain than ever before. But where did all this start and how does it end? What is the root cause of lawlessness in Britain? Why is criminality and disorder now a career choice like never before?
So you're a current snatcher. What areas are you hitting and why?
You want to hit like central high streets or something. Because everyone's just oblivious, bro. They're on their phone, just walking, texting someone, taking a video, bro, snatch your phone.
Is there a particular person that you target?
If I see you with your phone, I'll take it, bro. Anybody. Don't care if you're a grandma, granddad, in a wheelchair, I'll take your phone and your hand while you're in a wheelchair, bro.
Yes, Darth Vader was a thief. Did you know that? What he said amidst that blurring out of his voice, which was done to protect his innocence, of course, was that he doesn't care if it's your grandma. He'll still nick off you. Where is the real anger from our politicians? Have you ever heard Starmer even talk about this, let alone get angry about this? It's just not on the flipping radar, is it? They talk about Shabana Mahmood, the newish Home Secretary, being tough on home affairs, but where is she? Has there ever been a Cobra meeting about lawlessness? Did she ever scream from the rooftops that she's as mad as hell? I don't ever recall any of them, of any party, getting really annoyed about this, coming up with an initiative. We're going to tackle this. Mobile phone theft, shoplifting. It's just happening as everyday noise in our society, and no one is doing a darn thing. But what is the root cause of this? How did we get to this point? Was there a tipping point? Was it a particular government? Was it a set of initiatives? Did it creep in bit by bit? What was the point when it was done? You know, when I was a kid, I remember going into Woolworths with a couple of schoolmates, and one of them nicked a CD. I don't think I slept for a fortnight at the thought that this kid had nicked. We didn't know about this. They were sort of like a separate group, walked out the shop and then discovered, look what I've got. And there it was. He whipped out a Kajagoogoo or whatever the heck it was. And I thought, this is unbelievable. I know someone who's shoplifting. Unbelievable. People don't blink now. Even people who wouldn't normally shoplift. How many of those middle-class mums bag a sneaky pepper at the self-service checkout? But you know what I'm talking about here, the lawlessness of this country. Where did it happen and what is the root cause? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Steve N. Allen, the comedian and broadcaster, is back with us. Steve, good afternoon to you. I was going to say Happy Easter. Apparently it's the wrong day to say it. It's not a good day to say it on Good Friday, because Good Friday is a very sad day in the Christian calendar. I think the happy bit is Sunday, so not happy
spoil the
Easter.
ending for me.
Sorry,
don't ruin
I should have said spoiler
alert.
alert, shouldn't I, at the beginning?
Yeah.
Do apologise about that, Steve. What is going on in this country? We've talked about this for many years, so I'm not suggesting this is completely new under Starmer. It does feel sort of viscerally worse, but nonetheless, this has kind of been happening for a while. How did shoplifting get a free pass? Why are mobile phone thefts not taken seriously if recorded at all? Why, if you have a burglary, is it, you know, almost like pulling teeth to try and get a copper to come out, even though you've had your entire house robbed?
Yeah, you're right. The arc is longer than just one government. This has been gradual decline. And now it's ended up being this left-right debate, isn't it? So if people of a certain political side need to pretend that absolutely everything's fine in London, and people of the other side have to pretend that it is thoroughly lawless. And of course, it's somewhere in the middle, and we don't have to accept it. It doesn't matter where it is on that spectrum. The concept of not being good enough, that more needs to be done. You know what? We shouldn't actually have Clapham turned into some flash mob with violence and a little bit of looting. I was reading some of the coverage with the police saying there wasn't widespread looting. Well, that's because the shops had boarded themselves up. Here's the theory. Well, it's board up all shops and we could get looting down to zero. I mean, it's ridiculous that if you try and get Sadiq Khan talking about this, he'll point out on various metrics, London is safer than New York and things like that. Well, shoplifting isn't really a violent crime, is it? So you can let anyone just go absolutely frenzied of shoplifting, and you can get to say we're a safe city. Because if you get your stabbings down, your shooting's not even a thing in the UK, really, is it? Of course, that should be zero anyway. But you get these numbers down, totally ignore flash mobs, looting, shoplifting, phone thefts, not really a violent crime either. No one tends to die from a phone theft. So you say we're a safe nation, a safe capital, because you're just skewing it. And this is, so in part, it's chasing the wrong data, isn't it? It's having the wrong metrics. Getting the police to do certain things, which means you get to stand there and say we're safer. It doesn't matter if we're safer than we were in the 80s or less safe. If we're safer than New York or not safe, I would love to live in a world where we don't have a mob turn up to Clapham over a weekend. That should be achievable. That's not left-wing or right-wing, is it?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so. And I do find it extraordinary that, you know, if you've nicked a bit of pick and mix out of Woolworths, another spoiler alert, they don't exist anymore, but you take the point. I think pick and mix do, but just not in Woolworths. Probably because
you nick so much.
Because it was all stolen. People are mining now for pick and mix. We'll get those laces out if it kills us. Who knows? But nonetheless, the idea that it was sort of relegated to a kind of almost, well, it doesn't really matter kind of crime. Phone theft, you know. Well, in extreme cases, somebody is stealing nearly £2,000's worth of stuff from your hand, and yet you'd never get an officer out for that.
Yeah, because you're right. Part of it is the system became this: get the crime number and just crack on.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be last year, a year before, I guess. My bike was stolen from the train station, and there was not an urge within me of like, what's the point? Let's get another bike. There's that. What is it going to do? It's not insured. I don't need a crime number. So how many crimes aren't being reported because you just know there's absolutely no hope of anything happening? But when push comes to shove, if you don't have enough police, and you know what, this is a Tory thing, isn't it, cutting back on the police numbers, I guess you do end up having to prioritise. And fair enough, if you only had so much policing capability, you'd want murders looked at rather than shoplifting. But I'd also love for them both to be looked at, because we're meant to be a crime-free nation. Aim for that. You know, let's is that, again, not too much to ask for, is it? Because when I'm shopping, I don't want to be surrounded by shoplifters. When I'm walking down the street, Oxford Street had those signs put on the floor, be careful of your phone. You be careful of my phone. Why do you think the solution to phone theftery is just to tell people try and not let your phones get nicked? No, try and stop the criminals.
I mean, you just reminded me of something I'd completely forgotten. When I lived in East London and thoroughly enjoyed my time when I was there for a bit, I had a bike and I wanted to get rid of the bike. And I thought, do I put it in the small ads? Is that the way to do it? No, I'll just leave it outside a tube station, which is what I did. Came back about 2 hours later, it was gone. I kind of, nice. it did, so it was sort of recycled, albeit to Mile End Mick and his dubious hands of criminality.
It's better than what the council would do as well. That's the embarrassing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, they've got a better recycling rate over there at Criminal HQ. I'm intrigued where the tipping point was, though, Steve. Is it political? Was there something in our culture? Look, there's always been criminality around, you know. Hence Peaky Blinders exists, Clockwork Orange, God knows, you know, Brighton Rock, all of these films and books that have been written and have essential themes, you know, violence and terrible things happening. But there does seem to be somewhat of a, I don't think it overstretches it when you use the word epidemic in this sense, because it's en masse, it's industrial scale stuff. Did it happen against the backdrop of a certain political party? Was there, you know, did we all watch something sort of Derren Brown style subliminal on the TV one day and not realise we'd seen it? Was Trevor McDonald secretly shooting out messages to teach us to go and do bad things? Was it, did Reginald Bosanquet somehow kick off back then in the 80s? I don't know what happened, but was there a point when it was kind of all right and then it got really bad?
No, I think slow creep, you know, the frog in the boiling water and all that. I think what we've been through is society was always criminals and then society and police against them. And that was the status quo for a long while, through maybe all of history, I'd imagine, since we've had police. Then there was this creeping thing. I think a lot of it was not having enough police around, because then as soon as you start to get the message of cannabis is not worth arresting for, change the law, make it not a crime, or a crime, but don't have that weird situation that we had, I guess that was in the 2000s, the Paddock era, where you'd be having this message of it's still illegal, but we're not going to bother arresting for it. And as soon as that little crack was opened, then you get other crimes that's still illegal, but let's not send the police to it. Yeah. And that just got wider and wider. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't seeing this as a left v right. There was not like this. It wasn't a left v right spectrum argument of whether London is safe or not, or whether cities are safe or not. That seems to have boiled up in the last couple of years. But I think crime getting worse has been this creeping idea of, well, the police don't have to investigate everything. Well, then look where you end up. Then what? So either we're all going to have to be behind like locked doors and learn our own Krav Maga. That's the only way to stay safe. Or you have police. But slowly and surely we seem to be losing the idea of a police nation.
Yeah. It's funny, you kind of started off by talking about, no, but you know, we don't really have gun crime. Just as you were saying that, some breaking news came in. A 14-year-old boy shot dead in southeast London in Woolwich. 3 teenagers arrested. I mean, just the mere headlines of all of this, the horror of a teenager losing their life in this way. Shot, 3 teenagers arrested. I mean, this is just horrendous stuff. That's obviously an ongoing case, but it does sort of rather highlight where we're at. What is the root cause of lawlessness, Britain? 0344 499 1000. Let's move on to another story, Steve. Do you remember this?
Hey, it's great, we're still going Shell. Britain goes better with Shell, Shell, Shell. Keep going well, keep going Shell. You can be sure of Shell. Who's working hard on the North Sea swell? You can be sure it's Shell.
Well, you can't be sure any longer that it's Shell. I love the reference to the North Sea. Do you remember that, Steve? Goodness me. A little retro moment for us. Petrol is now off the scale. I walked past, my local Shell petrol station on the way to work this morning, and I noticed it crept up again for unleaded, nearly 162 now. Average at that particular station a month ago was about 142. So we are seeing, about 138, I tell a lie. So we're seeing huge leaps now in this, and it looks as if it's set to continue in that direction.
Yeah, I filled up my car just over a week ago. It was 144, and I've not driven since, and that is technically the best investment I have now, is that tank of petrol, because now it's worth way more than I paid for it. At some point, I might sell it on, you never know. I understand the forces at play here. I do think it was hilarious when this started to happen, when Rachel Reeves demanded a meeting with all of the heads of the petrochemical companies to see if they were doing things to impact the economy, and you think the brass neck of Rachel Reeves asking other people if they've impacted the economy badly. Wow, that would be a tough one. But I think I know what the solution is, and I've explained this on the internet loads of times. So the government makes a ton of money off these things with the duty, the VAT, and when the cost goes up, the amount of money the government takes goes up.
Of course, yeah.
So they could work out what they expected to get, reduce the percentage down. They'd still get the same money.
It's really easy,
no one's being ripped off.
Yeah.
And then we'd not be sat here going, I can't afford to fill the car up anymore.
Indeed. And of course, in that pie chart of what the government get, it's around about 55% in VAT and fuel duty. But then on top of that, of course, they're taxing the retailers on their profits. So throughout the entire litre, a massive amount is going to the government. It's funny how they start quibbling about, we're going to stop the VAT rise, or we're going to stop this. Actually, you could just take a chunk of tax off it. I know it's got to go somewhere else, but think outside the box on this, because these prices, for many people, are unmanageable. I mean, my local petrol station, there's a Santander have set up a loan department in there so that they can lend you some money if you want to fill the entire car up. It's curious.
Do you think it's great? I was going to say, when you try to fill up and the little cash thing says, do you want to donate 25p to charity? I wish I could, mate, but I've just dropped 200 quid on petrol.
Exactly that, yeah. Apparently, Alicia, our producer today, has informed me that Costco, for those who have an account at Costco, very exclusive, of course, it's where you can buy about 500 toilet rolls for 10p each. It's what was it, Alicia? 138. 138, and that would have been expensive, a little while ago. But 138, that's quite cheap compared to some of the ones we're seeing in the 160s and 170s now for unleaded.
Yeah, I mean, is your producer technically a business and therefore should have one of those cards? It feels like someone's pulling a fast one there if she's getting cheap bog rolls and cheap petrol.
Yeah, we don't have to be a business anymore, do you, for a bit of Costco? But she does bring a lot of stock into work with her. Sells it around the office, which is a bit weird, but that's a whole other internal story, Steve. Listen, stay with us. Steve Van Allen is here. We're talking about petrol. We are talking about the big question of lawlessness Britain. I mean, don't anybody tell you it's not out of control. It really is out of control. What we've done, we've just moved the kind of the needle, if you like, of acceptability, and it just keeps gradually nudging. So it becomes background noise. Oh, phone thefts. Oh, I had my phone nicked. Nobody really blinks. Oh, you see what happened in Boots or M&S, wherever. A load of kids ran in there and nicked stuff. It just passes you by. It should never pass you by in a civilised society. In the 21st century, it's the United Kingdom. This is normal stuff, and the point that it becomes normal, the point that it becomes almost a career option for teenagers and the like. I mean, we are in a real problem here. No one's seriously talking about it. What I'm interested in is, can you identify the root cause of that when we became so casual towards criminality at this level? Was there a tipping point? Was there a moment? Was there a party in power or an initiative or something that tipped us into that pool of criminal doom where we just accept that we are living in a pretty lawlessness place? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stephen Allen is with us, back with more from Steve in a few moments' time. What is the root cause of lawlessness, Britain? Here's a voice note from Helen.
Afternoon, Ian. Happy Easter. I think at the very least there should be photographs of these people's faces all over the place. Well, not all over the place, but in the relevant places, you know, so that at least they can be embarrassed and their parents will see them. And, you know, I mean, that's the very least I think they should do.
That's a good point. Of course, many of them, though, Helen, do stick the old balaclava on. That's a sort of favourite bit of uniform of your tea leaf and more. Comments on that, 03444991000. Steve and Alan with us. Let's move to this story, Steve. Tim Davey at the BBC saying the culture will never be fully fixed. He's suggesting that it can't happen. Is that because of the type of organisation the BBC is? Is it too big that you could never fully say, take a nice breath, breathe out now, it's all sorted?
I think yes, but it's not just that it's too big, that it's therefore too difficult. The whole system is set up to be a little bit protect the stars, isn't it? Protect the stars who get the big money, way too much power, because then it means that if you are in management, if anything comes your way and you think, oh, there's a bit of a scandal happening here, you will try and make the scandal go away. You're protecting the cash cow. And that's, I don't want to list the names of the celebs that's been the problem in there for legal reasons, but we can all think of them working for BBC and ITV, where it's all come down to that. Concerns were raised, but that just gets shut down. Well, there's your problem. There is your fundamental problem. And it is because the size of the organisation. It's because the amount of money that goes through it as well. If you can pay someone like 1.5 million to do their job, then there's a lot riding on the fact that there's not a scandal stopping them from doing their job. And look, I will say the BBC, at least it's trying. The gap between Jimmy Savile doing what he did and them actually mentioning it was decades, and now they're really speeding things up with the Scott Mills thing. Not that it's the same thing, but look at the speed. They're now only a decade is all it takes them. It's too unwieldy. The whole BBC is that way, though, isn't it? We've both worked there, and we know that the amount of money that's spent on people who don't really do much versus making content, which is all it should be doing. Make TV shows, make radio shows, and minimise everything else. I don't need an app. I don't need, there's like children's educational apps from CBeebies. Come on, that's for the internet to provide that.
Well, it is programs. I mean, there's so many layers to it. I mean, when you and I worked at the same place at the BBC, I can remember the first time, and you went to these as well, the editorial meetings after the first time I went to one of those, I thought I walked into the wrong room. I thought it was the actual BBC AGM. There were so many people sitting there. I thought this must be, I'm in the wrong place. No, apparently not. There really is 18 people work on this programme. And I thought, of course, there were some delightful and amazingly talented, really good regional journos there as well. It's not dissing any individual in that respect, but the culture of the BBC is strange. It's not open to change in any shape or form.
Yeah, because it's not under the same pressures that the commercial sector is, which therefore it loses that reason to be so streamlined, the reason to be the most efficient that you can be. When you are just gifted a massive amount of money, the kind of money that you could be sued by Donald Trump and still crack on, that's the money they've got happening with them. Of course, unless you've got a lot of efficiencies and everyone is pushing in the best direction, you're going to end up with these little eddy current pools, these oxbow lakes of employment. And most people who work on staff at the BBC are unfireable because of it. And it's our money that just keeps paying them off, gives them a pension even if they've been found to do wrongdoing. It's our money that I don't mind paying the licence fee if you're making shows. If you are paying way too many people and some of those people wrong-uns, no, I don't want my money going there.
I remember as well, trying to get change was always remarkable. I remember daring to dip my toe into the suggestion pool of change, and I mentioned one person that I thought should be producing my programme because they were demonstrably, by any measure, better than anyone else. And a woman looked at me and she just went, BJ. And I thought, I beg your pardon. And she's, what sort of place have I arrived? She said, broadcast journalist. I said, yeah. She said, he's not a broadcast journalist. What is this? She said, well, I'm a SBJ, senior broadcast journalist.
Show off.
I didn't... Exactly, yeah. Look at you. There's a pecking order. You can't just go, oh, that bloke in the office is really good. Get him on. No. Because there's a BJ, sorry, again, and then there's an SPJ. And you can't just circumnavigate those two positions, even if the person is better. Well, and I'm saying this is crazy. This is absolute mental. The bloke's better at the job. He's also more experienced.
But I understand how they got into that situation, because with an organisation so big, so much money going through it, you have to do things by guidelines and rules. You can't have people making it up. But the problem is then no one deploys those guidelines with common sense, because it's easier to stick to the wording and therefore no one can have you for doing it wrong. So you end up with these anti-meritocratic principles. Like, no, we stick to the guidelines, we make worse output because of it, but then no one really cares. I mean, we also attended the same radar meetings, the meetings where they'd talk about what the listening figures are. And it was a buffet. We both previously worked in the commercial sector of radio. I remember those meetings when I was working for GWR. The radar meetings were like, shall I find out if I'm fired today or not?
Yes.
That's how pressured it was. Whereas the BBC, it was like, let's have a little get-together, a little chinwag. There'll be vol-au-vents.
I can remember a guy whipping out a graph of one of the shows, and well, it wasn't really a graph, it was just sort of a line, because there was nothing on the graph to show any kind of movement. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, because when I've gone to these previous, here's your listener results for the quarter, I've been in some brutal ones, and, with bosses that will absolutely tell it like it is. And I thought, what are they going to say about this? I mean, the drive time show has gone down the flipping Swanee. But of course, it's the BBC, and your mental health is far more important than the product. So the guy literally went, look, this is a really good result for us. And I thought, are you kidding me? And he went on to explain why it was a good result, because the previous radar meeting had shown a kind of bit of a dip. And so to just have a flat line was a success. It was going in the right direction. And there was not a cat in hell's chance that this person was going to go, mate, you've got to pull your finger out because this is no good. You're delivering slop and you need to improve. That is never said at the BBC. Everything is congratulatory.
There's no fear of failure. It's not like your bad figures means you don't get the advertising, means you shut down. You can't shut down unless, it's such a big ship to turn around at sea that this is just going to carry on like this. Our taxpayer money will fund them when, if you didn't get the advertising, you don't get the revenue, that's it. You're out your job, you're gone. And that's what it used to be like in the commercial sector. Yeah. I'm not saying you should thoroughly get rid of all the intricacies of the BBC. I could understand an argument for a news gathering remit that then, because the BBC at the moment share some of their news with their local democracy reporters and stuff like that. You can have that. You can have some money that does that because the commercial sector wouldn't cover it. But the commercial sector would cover making Radio 1 and Radio 2. So, why am I paying for it?
Indeed. And can I apologise for bringing up your show, by the way, when I mentioned the line?
Look,
I didn't mean to do it.
It was a flat line. The previous one was slightly down. My mental health was really much better with all the no work I did.
Love it. I should say, actually, you and I did a show together there. So, maybe it was that one. Who knows? Listen, Steve, always good to have you on. Have a cracking Easter weekend, no pun and all the rest of it. Thank you to Steve N. Allen, the comedian and broadcaster. Lots to get into there. I do want to major on that subject of the root cause of lawlessness in Britain. Your thoughts on that? Anything else you've heard thrown in there too? Happily take your calls and your voice notes. This is the number for either 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Lawlessness Britain. There is a lot to talk about on this. This comes from Sarah. Says, I was burgled 30 years ago. I wasn't insured. The police asked one question. Are you insured? And when I said no, they said they don't usually find burglars. I've always wondered if they'd have asked more questions if I'd said yes. Sometime later, I got a letter from the police saying they knew who'd done it but weren't prosecuting. I called them to find out why. And they was told they'd take prisoners out for a day, buy them McDonald's and drive them around pointing out houses that they've burgled. So it's a win-win for them as they solve a crime. So the figures look better and the criminal gets away. At least they attended the crime back then. We reported for the we report for the crime number now. That's when we became a lawless society, when the police became an admin service for insurance claims. So if you say, yeah, I'm insured, then you're fine then. That's not really addressing criminality. We're going to speak to Layla Cunningham in just a second, Reform UK's mayoral candidate for London. Mike Neville, firstly, very experienced law voice, former Met Police DCI. You were in the job, Mike, for a long, long time. Was there a tipping point that you remember where it kind of, at one point, was sort of OK out there and then it went to mush?
I think it's where, after the Stephen Lawrence murder, the police went slightly crazy, in my view. You know, what should have been a common sense approach, of course, went ridiculous. But I also remember when Cressida Dick became the commissioner, you know, you used to be judged on how many burglaries and robberies and things we solved. And that all just overnight, I mean, the real change there. But the real big change to me over time was when I first joined, about half of the top officers were like people like myself, ex-military, and then the others were sort of university graduates. Now they're completely university graduates. There are no ex-military officers in those commanders up to the commissioner. That's the real sea change, I think.
I remember, I'm going to bring a name up here who you probably know, Brian Paddock. Do you remember, was it Lambeth, his patch? I can't remember.
I was there, Ian, I was there.
Yeah. Do you remember the police dog story, that we shouldn't be taking police dogs into places like Brixton because some people in that neighbourhood don't like dogs? And it was, I'm not suggesting that is responsible for all criminality, but it was that kind of thinking that seemed to set the ball rolling, Mike.
I'll tell you what sums it up to me, Ian. I had a meeting as a detective inspector. We were overwhelmed. There's some amount of work going on. Somebody decided that Brixton didn't need a CID office. I had people's wives ringing me up saying they either come home or they're getting divorced. Paddock came to the CID office, and one of my detective sergeants made a very good point about the levels of work, and he kept referring to his team as the blokes. And it's the only comment that Paddock came out with. He said, don't you think it's sexist that you refer to your team as the blokes? And
that was his priority.
So one of the female officers said, if you look at the board, they are all blokes. And then he left. That was his contribution. The idiotic, you know. And then when I was young PC, I wrote a report about robbery. He nicked it and put his name at the bottom.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So you've got great memories of Brian Paddock. We could maybe just do half an hour on him. But there is, so that tipping point from, look, it's never been rosy, you know, since Robert Peel was knocking around, there's been bad guys out there. We can talk about gang culture, the craze, and God knows what else. I mean, there's always been violence and there's always been criminality, and sometimes the kind of criminality changes. But what we seem to have now, Mike, is almost a background noise of lawlessness that I don't really remember. Now, I know I've got older over the years, like all of us. Is it that, or is there something genuinely bad going on out there?
Well, I think if you look at the Clapham police station, when I started as a young PC there, if you didn't get 10 arrests in a month, then the sergeant was on to you. What are you up to? When I did a Freedom of Information Act request 2 or 3 years ago, it turned out that 70% of the Metropolitan Police had not arrested one person in a year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how bad it is now. And so you've got the Met Commissioner now saying, with Khan saying, oh, you shouldn't be afraid. The Metropolitan Police is now arresting 1,000 more people a month. they did before. But what was the low starting point that they started from there? And what you have, of course, is that with this incident here that you can see that playing out, if that was 1989, the Clapham police station would have been turned out. Of course, that's been shut down now. There would have been 3 or 4 officers with dogs and maybe some horses deployed. There are no dogs. Well, the dogs and horses have been cut down, and the territorial support group would have come along. But now what you have, of course, is that you look at these images, and we can all see what we can see. They're mainly young black kids, and you've got officers, young officers who want to do their best. They've been frightened out of their wits. If they're accused of racism, they'll be sacked. Yeah. And so you have an ineffective police force, which is frightened of its own shadow, and the junior officers don't feel like they're backed up by their senior officers.
Yeah. So does it need, ultimately, from what you're saying, I guess, Mike, it needs a political kick up the backside, right? We've got to hear this right from the top. We need that to go all the way down to, the individual boots on the ground, right from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. We are going to get angry about this. We're going to get serious about this. There are going to be consequences about this.
But there's not going to be consequences. The senior officer in charge of Lambeth CID said these kids should think about consequences. Well, what are the consequences? Only 3 of them have been arrested. The government have abolished 1-year sentences. So they know if they get caught, there's nothing. What they're going to get? Yeah. A caution or something like that? You've got a left-wing government which has been obsessed with stop and search and racism and stuff. So even last week there's a report out saying how outrageous the police are. They stop more black people than they stop white or Asian people. Well, the facts are, Ian, that somebody needs to be honest about it. So the police cannot help who commits crime. They simply turn up and they have to deal with it. And constantly calling the police racist, making officers frightened of losing their jobs, makes them ineffective. And it leaves us all at risk. And we've seen with the knife crime, haven't we, that if you stop and search young black men, the losers are other young black men who get stabbed and die because of it.
Yeah. Was this all about feelings? Is that ultimately to sort of try and encapsulate this, that we seem to have developed a culture of people's feelings? It happens in the civil service. I was just talking previously to our guest, Steve. It happens in the BBC. Is it that? Have we just spent too long thinking about who's going to get upset by stuff?
Yeah, it's a culture thing. After Stephen Lawrence, they brought in these non-crime racist incidents where they said, if somebody feels that it's racist. Well, in this country, we've always dealt with facts. What are the facts around this? What's the evidence? And as you say, we're in a society now where feelings trump facts, and it's not good enough. And the facts are, when you see this in front of you, if that's your family out shopping, they'll be terrified. Yeah. People of all colours, of all creeds would be terrified. Imagine being an elderly person, whether you're black, white or Asian, being confronted with that as you're just trying to do your shopping. It needs to be gripped. And my fear, Ian, if it doesn't get gripped now, we're heading for a long, hot summer, and this will get worse and worse, and it'll end up with a massive crackdown, and then it'll end up with a big riot. So it needs to be sorted out right now.
Spot on. Mike, thank you very much indeed for that. Mike Neville. It was only when I was chatting to Mike there and I was putting together that BBC story, and do you remember we spoke to that former diplomat at the Foreign Office about a week or 2 ago? He did 10 years, and he was and I mentioned this because it was relevant. He was an ethnic minority I was about to say candidate. He wasn't a candidate. He'd got the big job. So he wasn't squealing at this from some kind of what you might look at as the conventional point of concern. I'm a white bloke. I'm fed up with seeing non-white people. It wasn't any of that stuff that often gets thrown up conventionally in these discussions. This was a bloke that was in there, he was diligent, he was brilliant, he worked really hard, but he could not believe the culture in the Foreign Office, which was more about making sure that everybody was okay. Are you all right? Are you okay? We're going to have a special day today. When it was all kicking off in Iraq, they had a National Afro Day at the Foreign Office. I'm not making this up. And he's thinking, why are they doing it? Okay, nothing wrong with an Afro Day, maybe somewhere. Not here, not on this day. Maybe that's a bit weird. It was an obsession. Feelings, people's feelings. Is everything okay? We're looking after people. We need to look after everyone. When did companies become surrogate families in that kind of sense? And I think that threads its way through society and absolutely in law enforcement. Carl is in Liverpool. What's going on, Carl? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
What do you got for us?
Yeah, I think you were speaking earlier on, lawless Britain and stuff like that. I think it goes, like you just mentioned, like schooling, police,
but
also the parents. Because when I was a kid growing up, we were always told to say please, thank you. There's no manners. The kids don't. There's no rules. They don't fear the police anymore. There's social breakdowns, and we have different cultures that are adding to an already children that don't pay attention anyway. They're just all lawbreakers. There's no rules with these kids anymore. You see it online. They're not interested. They're definitely not scared of the police when it comes to being in front of them. Whereas when I was a kid, we feared the police. We never looked at them in the wrong way. It's all changed. We've got soft university police not walking the street. They barely get out the car. They're all 4 foot nothing. They're all 4 foot wide. There's no. They don't put the frighteners up anyone.
But again, that's another kind of, when they... I'm not suggesting everything was always rosy back in the day, and the back in the day depends on how old the person is who's saying it. So, a 30-year-old can talk about back in the day. So, but there was a point, wasn't there, where clearly someone thought, previously we've been looking for police officers have to go through a physical training course. We like them to be 6'3" and just as wide. That all went out the window because somebody obviously thought, well, that discriminates against people who are not that build or whatever. So we can't do that. So we have to find another way of doing things. And consequently, we've ended up with what we've got.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a veteran, and when I was coming to retire, we dropped the sort of bar from where we wanted people to come into the military. Recruitment wise, we dropped our standards, and we were getting some terrible people through the door, unfit, fat. They weren't capable, and for some reason they were getting past, and it's still going on. It's all this wokeness. We're now told to be kind and look out for it, like support foreign people, and it's just the whole thing stinks. And if we don't get a grip of it, I've said to you before, Ian, we've got 3 more years of Labour, and if we don't get a grip of our teenagers and young adults now and point them in the right direction, by the time they get to my age, 45, they're all going to be woke left idiots who don't have a backbone in the body.
They're around every region, every borough, county and parish. Listen, Carl, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Stuart says, I remember saying years ago, when we stop disciplining kids at home and school and smacking was outlawed, it will escalate bad behaviour. Look at us now. I guess if you're going to do this discussion as well, thank you, Stuart, for that, by the way, you'd have to... I suppose you've got to throw in a bit of social media, haven't you? I know it's a bit of a go-to, much like Iran is now a kind of go-to. If anything's gone wrong or gone up in price, be Iran, won't it? Be Iran. That's the Ayatollah. That's Iran. It's the war in Iraq. It's like, no, it's nothing to do with that, mate. And social media, similarly, is a bit of a catch-all one. But I think when you consider what's going on, if you look at copycat, replications, memes, trends, threads, all of that, stories that are being told online, etc., Insta, Twitter, wherever it happens to be, there is definitely a bit of that. People performing. When you've got groups of kids live streaming their crimes, which would not have been an option years ago, that is very tempting. That's a bit of a thing to some people. So throw that in. Throw in the lowering of standards in all sorts of areas. Throw in a civil service, by which I mean everything from the BBC to the police through to the government itself, that is more concerned about people's feelings and acting as a surrogate family to people who work for it, rather than the big bosses who are going to say, these are the rules, do it, and if you don't do it, you're out. All of that kind of went out the window. Put it together, and I think you might have the beginning of an answer here. When or what are the root causes of lawlessness? Britain, 0344 499 1000.
9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I had no notice there. Thank you for that. There we go. We're back. Lots going on. Just gone 10 to 2. Back to your calls. Ray is in Colchester on Lawlessness Britain. Ray, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, yes, good afternoon. Yeah, and as one of your contributors quite rightly said, there's no one government or one action. But I think a whole combination of things, starting really from cost cutting. It's expensive to police. And anyone who comes up and says, oh, if we don't do this, therefore we're going to save X, Y, and Z, is always going to be listened to, the powers that be. You then have, on combination of that, of the decriminalising effectively, which means the police don't have to worry about what they look as low-level crimes, but actually affect ordinary people every single day. And you then have the politics of it, where you have effectively the left, which really run everything nowadays, have basically turned the victim of crime into the is no longer the ones to be worried about. It's the perpetrator of crimes that they're more worried about. They see them as the victim, and that's reflected all the way through our law system, where basically we don't give adequate protections, nor do we give adequate sentencing, which, if you remember, is meant to be able to actually rehabilitate. There's no chance of rehabilitation if you're sending someone away for literally a holiday for a few months. So you've got all of that, but don't underestimate that we've gone, in my lifetime, I'm only 60, one of the most high trust nations on earth, to one of a low trust nation, because the big elephant in the room is mass immigration from places who do not share the same thing. We also have now two-tier policing, which is obvious for everyone to see, that certain groups in society who come from certain backgrounds are allowed to do pretty much what they want.
Do you think they're allowed to do things, or do you think the police are playing? I mean, I can't imagine the old Bill sit there and go, oh, let's not arrest him, he's a Somalian.
Well, there's a whole big investigation which is about to go on, which would rather prove otherwise, I think.
That's interesting.
Which is about to take place. And on top of that, you also have, if you've got people coming from different areas who basically they're coming from low trust, high crime areas, they don't suddenly become take on what the area is they're moving into. They bring their beliefs with them. And so you've got this toxic recipe now, where I'm afraid the powers that be, they are no longer in control of this, and haven't been for quite a long time. They've tried to cover it up. They've used the press. They've used various things to try and suppress things. But it's becoming too obvious now, day-to-day things where people now, it's the law-abiding who are fearful, and the criminals who have no fear, because they have nothing really to fear anymore.
Ray, on that point, thank you. Ray in Colchester, they have nothing to fear anymore. Well, that is also true, isn't it? If we're building the pie chart of what the heck has gone wrong, that's absolutely bang on. The consequences, what are the consequences? What are the consequences? Appear to be very few consequences. So you know you're not going to... If you went down the high street tomorrow and started nicking clothes and spirits or whatever from different places, you are not going to jail. You are not going to jail. So you might go to court, you might get a fine, you might get a community sentence of some kind, but you're not going to jail. So the person carrying out those kind of crimes, what will be called sort of minor crimes, but they're not minor at all, they're massive. They know that. I mean, they know that before. I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying this, but that's where we're at. Christine is in Yorkshire. Christine, hello.
Hello there.
Hi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just think there is no discipline anymore in this country, particularly with youngsters.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson, I believe, was the one who actually got water cannons. Theresa May, I think, got rid of them. If you used water cannons, you could disperse those feral children and, and without doing them any damage, quite frankly.
But you'd only use them, though, wouldn't you, if you had a situation where you've got a whole group en masse? And what if your water cannons are in another borough?
Well, I mean, that obviously is a problem. That's a logistical problem. But
True,
the thing
yes.
is, I think the trouble is there is nothing here to deter. You know what? A slipper never did me any harm. You know, it taught me discipline. And there is nothing nowadays. You know, an ASBO is a badge of honour now.
Yeah.
The children do not care. There is nothing to deter children who behave badly, because we're just, they've got a poor home, they've got this. There is always an excuse, and we have to bring something back. I still am nervous of the police, and I'm in my 60s, because, we were brought up. They had to be treated with respect.
Well, that's gone right out the window, that bit, hasn't it? The treating police with respect has completely disappeared. Listen, Christine, I have to move because the news is upon us, but thank you very much indeed for that. Just a quick word on petrol. Connected, Barry in Somerset says, first off, get an electric car. Next reason for all this trouble going on in London and everywhere else is a simple word, discipline, or the lack of it, right from infant age. So discipline, parental discipline through systems like schooling and the like. And yes, we do need to recognise some kids have challenges and they need a bit of help rather than punishment, but on balance, you just need something rigid. You know, strict teachers were pretty cool, weren't they? Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news at 2.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Loads to get through and continue to take your calls on lawlessness Britain. What is the root cause from your vantage point? Was there a tipping point? How are you seeing that? We'll look at that in more detail. Also this afternoon, Donald Trump shaking up the military and political leadership amid that war in Iran. He's been mocking Keir Starmer, raising tensions over global oil routes and talking about bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. Is he losing his mind or is he on the right side of history? Details in a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, Ed Miliband is set to approve that Jackdaw gas field to boost energy security, while solar power hits a record 6.9% of UK electricity, and affordable panels are now going to be available in supermarkets. More on that story too. And it can't have escaped your notice, it's Good Friday. Just a long weekend for many, but for Christians, it is time to reflect on the resurrection of Jesus and the renewal of faith. But what does it all actually mean? Do you know your Easter history? We'll speak to one bishop who will enlighten us, perhaps quite literally. Details to come. 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Ian in Newcastle, who says, in my opinion, the problem with lawlessness is due to what I call the great liberal experiment. Instead of being tough on crime, we have to consider the perpetrator's background from a broken home or consider their human rights. School kids don't get corrected. No red marking. See me anymore. Personally, I think this started with the Blair government in conjunction with his human rights lawyer wife. I think you're bang on, Ian, in all of that. There is when people use the word, oh, it's a bit liberal, you're being a bit liberal, it's not a pejorative. I mean, genuinely, the intelligent interpretation of that experiment, I think Ian has absolutely hit it on the head. It does go from schools, it does go into areas of the workplace. We do look at what teachers or how teachers teach and discipline, also in the home as well. And the difference, the big difference, when I was at school, the cane and all that stuff had long gone, but I don't think it's just that. The workplace is the kind of the big change for me. You've got to do things differently in the workplace. You've got very powerful HR departments, but it's not just that. The liberalisation of the workplace in terms of ensuring that everybody's okay and becoming a kind of surrogate family to employees is just frankly bizarre. I mean, it's bonkers, but it's utterly bizarre how that works. When I was working at the BBC, why did I go into meetings where before they even talked about programming, they asked how everybody was? Is everybody okay? And it wasn't like you're right, it wasn't that. It was a genuine, let's go round the table. It was a kind of kumbaya moment. Everybody all right? Everything okay? There's people you can talk to if you're not feeling okay. I think it's, no, I'm having this conversation with my mum, not my boss, for God's sake. I know there can be a hangover from private life into work life, but this thing has gone way out of control. But if you and that's just the BBC, you could say it doesn't really matter. It does actually matter, but you could argue that. But when it's in the police service, when it's in the government, the civil service, the Home Office, and places such as that, you begin to see why we have not just a bit of a problem, but a massive problem. Now, let's move to Donald Trump, shaking up the military and political leadership amidst that war in Iran. He's ousted his top army general and his attorney general. He's been mocking Keir Starmer. He likes an impression or two. He's done Macron a few times. He's now on to Starmer, and he's talking about bombing Iran into the Stone Age. I'm intrigued by this because there's a lot doesn't make sense. And I tell you what, I spoke to a Wall Street Journal journalist the other day, and we were talking about the sort of inconsistencies in Trump's leadership at the moment. You know, he talks about the war being over, and there's a lot that doesn't make sense. And the minute you venture into that territory, you often get a lot of criticism, and you're accused of that, I mean, almost laughable phrase that you've got Trump derangement syndrome, which is sort of a catch-all way of saying never criticise Donald Trump. What makes this difference is there's a lot of very die-hard, I mean, I'm talking real die-hard Republicans who are not happy with Donald Trump. I would raise Vice President Vance as exhibit number one, frankly, on that. And I don't think you'd really call him as someone who's got Trump derangement syndrome. Let's, however, get some brevity on this. Andrew Fox is a senior fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, former major in the parachute regiment. Good to see you, Andrew. Thank you for coming on. Look, we know that Donald Trump does divide the room. That's kind of part of his thing. But this has been interesting by any measure, how this is being dealt with. Is there a plan? Was there ever a plan? Is there an end game to all of this? It's a confusing picture. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, I'd agree too. It's my job to look at this, and even I'm somewhat in the dark as to where this is going. I mean, look, I can see four options on the table, and it's which of these four that Donald Trump chooses. He can keep going as it is and keep dismantling the Iranian regime in the hope that something happens on the ground in Iran and there's a seismic change. He can negotiate with what's left of the regime and come to some sort of deal with them, which will involve concessions to the Iranians. He can escalate and go for a ground operation and try and seize key areas within Iran, or finally he can unilaterally stop and walk away. And I think those are the only really four options on the table here. So it's down to which one he takes.
Yeah, and of course it's very difficult to follow this because he was telling us that the war is won. The war's won. We're done here. It's kind of, there's no more capability. But now he's kind of ramped up the rhetoric again. He made that comment about bombing Iran into the Stone Ages and talked about how there'll be nothing left of the place, etc. So, which isn't something you would say if he'd already won the war.
Well, quite. And we have to think about who he's talking to here. Now, the war itself is costing the American taxpayer about $1 billion a day. It's well over $36 billion they've spent on this war so far, and Mr. Trump has midterms on the horizon. So there is certainly a domestic audience he needs to speak to try and keep them on side with the war. He's just plunged to the lowest ever recorded approval rating of any US president, so that will undoubtedly be on his mind. Sure. And then, of course, there is keeping pressure on the regime in Tehran, making sure that they don't think that they're going to get away with whatever they're planning. And it's about managing that tension, I think, between the domestic and the international, which is why we're seeing so much conflicting reporting coming out of the White House.
Yeah. He's talked about this new regime that is better than the old regime. We can talk with these guys. We've got a dialogue going. They're intelligent. And I tried to look into this. I stand to be corrected, Andrew, but as far as I could work out, the new, quote, new regime is the old regime. I mean, it's the former Ayatollah's son running the game. Everybody else appears to be still in position.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they've had huge attrition at the top of the Iranian regime, but they're designed to withstand that. They have a very well executed process in place to keep continuity within the regime itself. And there is an argument that the younger generation of IRGC commanders are actually even more hardline than their predecessors. So the regime is still very much in place. Yes, they've had changes at the top, but we can't call that regime change for even a second.
Yeah. Do you sense in any form then on this, Andrew, that this kind of timeline or this suggested timeline, we're going to be out in a couple of weeks? Does that seem remotely possible to you?
Well, it depends on which of those four options I articulated. The Americans could, of course, unilaterally decide to end this with the Israelis in 2 weeks' time. That's absolutely an option. I think what we're also seeing right now is an attempt to make sure that whatever happens and however this ends, they can claim it's what they intended and it is a massive victory in every respect. Now, of course, there are factors that will certainly turn this from a victory into something else. The first of those is the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran retains control over that strait, that's actually a huge strategic win for the Iranians. That's better than it was for them before the war. Likewise, if the regime in Tehran manages to stay in place, manages to reassert control over the country using their extensive IRGC and Basij militias, that's also a win for them. They will consider surviving a win, very much in the same way that Hamas did in Gaza. So I think the Americans are trying to shape a victory narrative whilst trying to work out exactly how they're going to get themselves out of this.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I just misread this. Maybe I was too optimistic about the whole thing. But the vision I kind of had when this began was that we are going to be seeing a complete regime change. There'll be carnivals in the street. Pahlavi will be wheeled in on a throne. Everything will be different. You know, there'll be speakers there. Trump himself might even be standing in the middle of a square of what's left of Tehran. You know, that's the kind of way I feel it was sold.
And I think that's what we were all hoping for, but we haven't seen a number of the markers that you would expect to see if regime change were going to happen. You're looking for a psychological shock, which is something like the leader being killed, and of course that happened, and that wasn't enough to end the regime.
Yeah.
You're looking for a military shock, which is the military either refusing or changing sides. We haven't seen that yet. And then you're looking at the people rising up and overthrowing palaces and that kind of thing that we've seen so often this century. None of those things have really had a decisive effect yet. And of course, remember that regime change doesn't happen on demand. And the protests we saw in December and January was 6 months after the battering that the regime took in the June 12-day war. So it may well be the case the regime is heavily weakened to the point where a few months down the line, the people might have a chance to rise up again. But this is all conjecture. It's what we hope will happen, not what definitely will happen.
Indeed. Just a word as well, while you're with us on this, Andrew. Britain vowing to comprehensively reject Iranian attempts to charge ships $2 million tolls to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Yvette Cooper chaired this sort of virtual meeting. There were 40 countries involved in this, calling for an immediate unconditional reopening of the waterway. But Iran are clearly still functioning at some level because they're making heady demands like this.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to go down as one of the greatest military blunders in history that the Americans didn't secure the Strait of Hormuz during this war. I genuinely think they thought that decapitation strike on day one would bring the war to a very swift conclusion. I think perhaps they were a bit overconfident after how well the Venezuela operation went, and the idea that they've somehow just left the strait to be seized control of by Iran, and then the rest of the world is working out how on earth to fix this. Is a really damning indictment of how the Americans organised this operation. That's an astonishing failure.
Indeed. Andrew, great to see you. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for your time, sir. That's Andrew Fox, Senior Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. He's a former major in the parachute regiment. He knows his way around the military, that is for sure. It is genuinely a confusing picture of what is happening. Is there an end game? Is there an exit strategy? Is there a plan there? It's not wrong to ask that. I mentioned there's a lot of mad as hell Republicans that America are even there, by the way. And the one thing you do forget is that this is ultimately Israel's war, backed by America. But when you look at the headline, it doesn't look or feel like that any longer. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on Donald Trump in all of this? Is he playing a blinder here? Is this the kind of... We keep hearing about the... And you tend to do this, I think, with leaders. You assume, well, there must be a bigger plan. There must be a genius behind this. There's got to be a plan that we're not seeing. It's sort of 4D chess game going on. Ah, that's what he did. I see it now. Is that what's happening? But we can't quite see it yet, like one of those pictures where they tell you if you stare hard enough at those scribbles and weird patterns, a picture of an angel or a horse will emerge if you stare at it long enough. You know, the things... Is it that? Or are the United States absolutely clueless on what they're doing here? Let's go back to our main subject as well. Simon's in Northamptonshire. We asked the question, Simon, what is the root cause of lawlessness Britain? What are you making of this? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Great show as always.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's an easy one. You touched on it earlier, the social media element. I get it's an easier one to go to, whether it's, oh, let's blame all of our ills on there. But I think it's kind of a perfect storm. You've got, as all your other contributors have said, the lack of fear of the police and the lack of any consequences of things happening with crimes being downgraded. But where social media plays a part, I think, is where these youngsters, when I was growing up, you wouldn't really have an audience to do things. So if you decided to be a bit of a Herbert, you could maybe do it for 10 or 15 minutes in class. You'd have your audience removed. That would take away the incentive to do it. And what social media has done has just allowed all of these people to have a window to the entire world where people can like and comment on it, and that empowers them. But the second factor to that is, what I also think happens is with social media, if they choose to insult their friends or do something online outlandish, again, years ago, we would have consequences. If I went up to someone at school and abused them, insulted them, they'd punch me, so it'd be face to face, or they'd do something similar. Whereas now you have that kind of, I'm behind a screen, I can say and do whatever I want, and this then emboldens them. You put all that together and kids are like, well, you know what, I want to get something for free because everything costs so much, and I can get all this attention online. as win-win. What's not to like? Let's go on and do this. And they genuinely think they can maybe make a career out of it. Like, I'll be the next reality star.
Yeah.
So I see all these deadbeats on TV making money, doing all kind of non-entity things. And I think they think, I'll just do stuff like that. This is what gets people likes. And I think kids nowadays, they very much confuse likes and, I don't know if that's the right word, but
well, it's one of them,
with
yeah.
respect. They're like, I don't want to get respect from anyone. I just want to get attention and likes. Doesn't matter what I do. Whereas, again, when we were children, there was this thing you'd have called shame. If you did something bad, you'd be embarrassed by it. You'd be ostracised. That just doesn't happen anymore. So I think put all of that together, and it's the perfect storm for where we are now. And the sad thing is, it's only going to get worse because everything is a badge of honour now. If you've got a mental health problem, that's something to be lauded. If you've got a broken home, that's an achievement, and that's an excuse for getting away from doing these things.
Indeed. Very well put, Simon. Thank you very much for that. Great call from Simon in Northamptonshire. I think we have, I can't supply you with qualified evidence of this, but instinctively it feels we have quite a lot of dysfunctionality going on, quite a lot of dysfunctional families. We've always had a bit of that. There's none of us right now that can't remember the kind of odd family down the road that didn't give a hoot about anything. That's never not been there entirely. But there is almost a sense that we've got an industrial version of that. There's a lot of that going on. Now, you can talk about how families have fractured over the last few decades, and this is now the consequences of that. Maybe there's something in that as well. Immigration definitely plays a part in this, if for no other reason than numbers. So there's that. So social cohesion kind of goes a little out the window. Why would it not? And if you live in an area where that is heavily affected by that particular component, that's going to be in the pie chart again. So there's lots of different reasons. I do think the dysfunctional family thing is up there. Social media has compounded all of the issues, the lack of consequences, the liberalisation of education and the liberalisation of our systems, including police and government. It's a pretty darn horrendous cocktail, frankly. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. Loads more still to come. We're going to talk about Easter as well. What's the meaning of Easter? What does it actually mean? People got us Good Friday. Do you know what Good Friday really means from a Christian perspective? Do you know what that story is? How we got here? Why is Easter, by the way, not on the same day every year? You know, like Christmas is. That'd be rather handy. Not that that is the point, but you understand where I'm coming from. And Jesus was a Jew, wasn't he? So why is he the king of the Christians? What's going on? If you didn't know, we're going to explain all in just a couple of moments, right here on Talk.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS 25 inches, lit, 4, 3, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. 24 minutes after 2 o'clock. We will go back to your calls shortly. So it's Good Friday, a day many enjoy. It's just a long weekend, but of course Easter has true meaning if you're a Christian, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But of course that's not today. A time for reflection, faith, renewal, celebrated around the world. Let's clarify a few things about Easter. Bishop Kai Dewar is with us, missionary bishop with the Confessing Anglican Church. Kai, always nice to see you. I'm sure it drives you mad, doesn't it, when people get it all wrong? I'm told that Good Friday is not the day to say Happy Easter, because there's nothing particularly happy about this day from a Christian perspective.
It's not, and I have to confess, there was a point in the past where it used to drive me mad. It doesn't anymore, because I realised that through time and through the kind of watering down of the teaching of Christianity in schools and various other places, that most people don't know much about Easter other than buying Easter eggs in the local Tesco's or Morrison's or wherever else they might buy them. So no, it's not. And you're right, Good Friday is a strange and unique day in the Christian calendar, because one might wonder why, when it's the day we commemorate the painful, agonizing and brutal death of Christ upon that cross at Calvary, a place where I've had the privilege to physically stand at Golgotha, the place of the skull. Why we would call it Good Friday. Well, we call it Good Friday not because of what happens, but because of what God does through what transpires at the crucifixion and brings about an eternal hope for all of us as Christians and believers around the world.
So Good Friday was the day of the crucifixion, of course, and then Sunday was the day of the resurrection. I think I've got the chronology. What happened on the Saturday? I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, was everybody just mourning on that day? What was the sort of historic? What as far as we know, what was happening at that point? Because nobody was expecting what then happened on the Sunday, I would imagine.
So as we look at the Jewish calendar, most of the Saturday would have been considered the Shabbat, the Sabbath. Their calendar begins at sundown and goes through to sunset again for each day, whereas ours starts at midnight to midnight. So that was a day that no man could work, no man could, every Jew would have had to fulfill the Sabbath laws concerning their actions, which is why there is on Good Friday a rush to get Christ, who has been declared dead by the centurion in charge of the crucifixion, off the cross and into the tomb to be buried, so that at least he has some dignity in death, having had no dignity in the crucifixion. So most of Saturday is just spent where people would have been mourning, pondering what had happened. I'm sure that his mother, his disciples, the friends and families, even those that were gathered around the cross that might have been indifferent or antithetical to what was going on, must have had questions about what they witnessed as we read the gospel accounts, to see the way in which Christ died. No cursing, no anger, but simply reciting prayers and talking to his mother, to his disciples, to his family, and of course those infamous words that we hear echoed in that glorious gospel message, which would have been said again today in Trafalgar Square: Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we sat, the church, the believers as they were, because of course it wasn't the church back then, but those that believed in Christ, in his message, sat and pondered, for he had told them, on the third day I will rise. And here they are, broken and broken-hearted, I would imagine, that the man that they have followed for the last several years, the man whose teachings they have trusted, the man who Peter said, you have the words of eternal life, is dead and buried. But as you rightly said, Sunday comes, and when Sunday morning comes, everything changes.
Indeed, the resurrection, of course, and that was the joyous part of this story, of course. But there's confusion around the picture. A couple, I'm just going to throw these at you, Kai, because I know you can answer these, because for years people have... Firstly, what the hell were the Romans doing there?
Well, the Romans were the occupying...
Were they not in the wrong story? I mean, that's, when you look at sort of Ben-Hur and stuff, you think, hang on a second, this doesn't work. What's going on?
Well, you've got to remember that Judea, at the time, Samaria, all of those areas, what we now call Jordan, but Transjordan, Egypt even, were under Roman occupation. Yeah. So they were the occupying force, the government of the day, usurping the authority of the Jewish people and overseeing them as an occupied people, very much like we see, when countries invade other countries now in a time of war, and you have the occupied forces. We had it. The most vivid recollection that anybody would have any knowledge of, either personally, if they were old enough, or through most recent history books, is Central Europe during the occupation of Hitler. So it's akin to that. The Romans were kind of like the Nazis of the day, for want of a better expression.
Sure. Yeah.
Not the best analogy, but people get in mind the picture them trying to paint then when you bring it closer to home.
Well, I think the subjugation that was carried out across, even over here, of course, we know what happened. So it's not a bad analogy at all, I don't sense, Kai. But what about this, though? Okay, so Jesus was a Jew. He was crucified as a Jew, but was resurrected, and he was a Christian. I mean, if I was a Jew, I'd be fuming about this. It's like, hang on, what's happened here? Firstly, he was one of us, and now he's become a Christian. What's happened here? What's the truth of that aspect of this story?
Well, that's a modern misconception, because Christ doesn't come to start Christianity. Christ comes as the Messiah, the Savior of the Jewish people, the one that would reconcile the Jews back to God in their hard-heartedness. And Christ finds these disciples, these followers that believe that he is the prophesied Messiah. And as a result of that, and as a result of the crucifixion being brought around, Christ's death is brought around by the Jewish people that rejected him. They carry that message of the Messiah to the Gentiles then, those that are not Jews. And suddenly in that, what we find is them preaching that Christ is the Messiah that fulfilled the Mosaic law, that fulfilled the covenant. Jesus says it in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5 and verse 17, for I did not come to do away with the law, talking about the covenant of Moses, but that the law might be fulfilled in me. So he's received as the Messiah, and because the message goes beyond just the Jews, and he's taken to the Gentiles, taken to those that are not born into Jewish lineage and are considered to be Jewish by birth, then it takes on it takes on a different dynamic. His resurrection prompts his followers to share that faith beyond their walls, and out of that faith, out of that proclamation of Christ as the Messiah, beyond the Jews to the Gentile, is where we see this distinct faith that we now call Christianity emerge. And I stress again, it's not Christ that begins this faith. It is Peter and the apostles and what they teach after the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of the risen Lord.
And what about the Romans in all this? What religion were the Romans when this was happening?
Well, the Romans were largely pagan. There are some Romans that in the early days of the church heard the message of the gospel and converted to Christianity, became messengers of Christ. There's historical documentation that leads us to the conclusion, alongside the gospels, that the centurion in charge of Christ's crucifixion, hearing him crying out to God on the cross and witnessing what he does, ends up surrendering his life to Christ. It's very clear, even in the gospels, that Pontius Pilate's wife recognizes Christ as a holy man, as a righteous man, even tells Pontius Pilate, do this man no harm. That's there for everybody to read. So there are a lot of Romans that see what is happening. There are a lot of Romans that carry on in their paganism after the resurrection and the birth of the early church and persecute Christians around the world. Nero is the most famous of all the Roman emperors for the persecution of Christians at the time, blaming the fire of Rome, which he started, upon the Christians as well, to turn the people against him. And that carries on until we have a British-born Roman emperor, Constantine, who in 325 unifies the Roman Empire under one faith, the message of Christianity, having been a believer of Christ himself and raised in the teachings of Christ. And I know that history speculates about what point he accepted Christ in his life, but the reality is he dies believing in the risen Christ and unifies Rome under the Christian faith. And from there, we see the mass expansion of the Christian church all across the Roman Empire and further beyond that.
Listen, very thorough stuff, Kai. Do have I was about to say a relaxing weekend, despite the power of a day like today. But I know this is, clearly by definition of your work, one would assume the most poignant part of the Christian year.
It most certainly is. It's by far my busiest weekend of the year.
Yeah.
Something that I love and I relish. And as I reflect and lead other people in reflecting on the death of Christ that we witness and bear memory to today, our hope is always leaning forward to Resurrection Sunday, to the moment when the Christ rises from the dead. But in that, and I would say this as I disappear from your screens, in that, it gives us, through the ages, through the annals of time, the most incredible eternal hope, not just way back then when Christ was risen, but even today, even now in the country, in the mess that it's in, even without what everybody's facing with cost of living and all of that lot, there is an incredible hope for you, for me, for every single one of us as we turn our eyes and turn our heart to the risen Christ.
Kai, thank you very much indeed for your time. Bishop Kai Dewar, great to have you on again, as ever, missionary bishop with a confessing Anglican church. Very special weekend from a Christian perspective. Often, I think the message, like Christmas, does get relegated in the sense of the sort of commercial overreach of eggs and presents and stuff. But interesting to get some clarification as well on some of those areas. So many people scratch their heads on those issues. I think he did it well for us. Thank you to him. Back to you shortly. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Dave in Bristol says, listening to the gaslighting statement from Khan, should he rephrase his claims that knife crime is down, gun crime is down, and rest and refer to reported crimes are down? I'm in my 70s and had an uncle who served as a police officer all his working life after he left the army. And I can say without a doubt that he would be ashamed that his service had the poor reputation it has now among the law-abiding population, and disgusted at the excuses for failure that constantly comes from senior police commanders. This is not Bobby on the beat territory. Don't blame the cop that you see around. The idea that somebody didn't investigate a shoplifting incident isn't down to some individual PC. It is much higher than that. There's much more going on in these kind of stories. Dave, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's talk a little bit about net zero and solar here. Ed Miliband is expected to approve that Jackdaw gas field, which, God, that must have hurt, which could supply gas to over 1 million homes this winter amid energy security concerns and shifting party positions on North Sea drilling. Meanwhile, solar power has apparently surged to a record almost 7% of UK electricity last year. We've now got Lidl and Amazon set to sell affordable plug-in panels supported by government loans as renewable energy adoption accelerates. It's a mixed story. Only one man to talk to about this. Ben Pyle is the co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Good to see you, Ben. Firstly, I mean, Ed Miliband, he's a curious character, Ed Miliband, isn't he? When that Heathrow expansion was given the go-ahead, I thought, well, if you are Ed Miliband and you're that much of an evangelist, you'll walk the plank at that point in absolute disgust at your own government. But, of course, the vanity of a politician usurps any principles, so he hung around. And then I thought, well, if they give this, the go-ahead for the gas field, the Jackdaw gas field, he's definitely going to walk the plank. Now he's going to green light it through.
This is what the Times were reporting last night and this morning. And it seems to be perhaps a leak from Desnes that's what he's considering. He's perhaps minded to license one of the fields, Jackdaw, I believe, but not Rosebank, was what the Times was reporting. And there was curiously no statement from Miliband or even Desnes for quite a while into today. And only about an hour ago, they seem to be somewhat rowing back from this, saying that this is speculation, and that actually the decision doesn't rest with Ed Miliband, it rests with the regulator, which I think is probably the North Sea Transition Authority. Also, to be honest, I don't know. It sounds like that decision has been made, probably to let one of those fields go through, but then to say it's got nothing to do with Ed. And you're right, he's a bit of a Smeagol, the Precious, the Ring, and he does sort of state, he has in various interviews and in podcasts and so on, he has sort of stated that he was quite traumatized by his loss of the 2015 general election, but he's sort of discovered that he doesn't have to be a prime minister to do what he calls big things, and part of those big things, it seems to be dismantling a lot of British industry and causing a great deal of grief to people who are dependent on cheap energy and so on and so forth. And the problem with that is what he thinks he's going to do is, or what his advocates claim, is to flood the market with cheap energy, with renewable energy, and then by flooding the market, that will force the price down. Now, the problem for those advocates is that they've forgotten that Ed has agreed to give those developers of wind farms and solar farms prices that are higher than can typically be achieved by gas-fired power stations. So there's arithmetically, we cannot have cheaper green power than cheaper power from gas, or heaven forfend, coal or nuclear power. The system has been rigged against it. But nonetheless, Ed Miliband believes that once you've dismantled all of this energy infrastructure, this conventional energy infrastructure, then you usher in somehow some kind of social democratic utopia, that in the place of, or this sort of, that it's almost as if oil and gas themselves create inequality in society, and that's why people's bills are high.
Yeah.
But of course, it's all jammed tomorrow. And I think, Ian, every time I've been on your show, and we've talked about this, it's followed a crisis, which just shows how bonkers the policy agenda has been and how badly it's failed to live up to all of its promises. Yet somehow they managed to sort of convince the rest of Parliament and convince policymakers and the government that they've got to press on with this.
Indeed. And when you look at, I mean, the issue we're in at the moment, which is a complete mess in terms of energy. There is no energy security because of the dilly-dallying, the ineptitude of people like Ed Miliband, who believe he's on some kind of messianic mission to make the world a better place. And how he really believes this can be done autonomously in one country is another question for another day, perhaps. But when you see that headline, Ben, that there's gas to supply over 1 million homes this winter, that's really what we should be looking at, isn't it? It's stories like that. This is going to work. The gas is already there. We haven't got to get it from somebody else. It's on our doorstep. Make it happen.
That's right, and this one field that looks like it's able to come online by winter if the DESNZ pulls their finger out. That could supply 6%, just one field, 6% of Britain's needs, and that let's do the rest as well. We're already 50% self-sufficient in gas. We should have been exploring the rest of the North Sea to see what it's capable of. We should have been developing new technologies, and we should have been looking at fracking for the last 20 years. But instead, it's taken a series of crises, a war in Europe, a catastrophic war in Europe, a catastrophic war in the Middle East, a catastrophic lockdowns, for even the Parliament to acknowledge that there is a problem with the policy agenda. And this is a 11th hour kind of realization, even from the Tories and a lot of the establishment of a lot of the news media establishment, a lot of the quangos and everything. They just don't seem to be able to shake off this commitment to green utopia. I can't put it any more simply. And I think it's doing us incredible harm, and it needs to be addressed in short order. Should have been addressed 20 years ago.
True.
But here we are.
Let's, just before the Ofcom fans, and we know they are out there, just before the Ofcom fans start discombobulating again, Ben, let's just bring in this story then, because apparently solar power, is now giving us nearly 7% of our electricity. So some would say, well, Ed Miliband was right then, Ben. Look, we've got more and more of it coming on board. What's not to like?
Yeah, it's great if you only need power at lunchtime. But we're we're at a very northern latitude. And we need 24/7 supplies of power. Now, the Greens argue that you can mitigate the amount you use, the amount of fossil fuels you use, by having this power available at lunchtime in July at the weekend. But it's not a solution that's adequate for any sort of serious economy. And of course, it's also driven by subsidies. So these subsidies have come down. They're on their face value. They're sort of roughly equivalent to the price of gas or price of power from gas. But it has to be remembered that it's policy that's pushed the price of gas up. Things like carbon taxes, they're called the carbon price at least. That's pushed the price of gas up. So the price of power up. So it's probably 3 times as much as it should be. or certainly the price of gas in Britain is currently 6 times the cost of gas in America. So like these economic comparisons that are offered by a lot of the Greens, they don't look at what's technically achievable by conventional forms of generation, and that's probably because they don't know, because they're too busy writing letters to Ofcom about your guests and what they've claimed. I wish they would spend a little bit of time looking up what the realities of the energy market, but they just seem to be much more inclined to sort of generate these talking points about things like solar without really looking about what are the implications. Now, this sounds great. It sounds like you can just pop down to Lidl and get yourself some solar panels, and that might save you £200 a year off your energy bill. Best case, absolutely best case. But that's predicated on these high energy prices. So it's in a sense predicated on these wars and other crises that we're experiencing. They're not saying, well, what would happen if we could generate power from homegrown gas instead. These are the comparisons that need to be made.
And the bit I couldn't work out, I mean, I'm not oddly a solar panel engineer. I don't know if you knew that, Ben, but that isn't something I specialise in. But if you went down to the shops and bought one of these things, bought it home, they talk about plug-in panels. I'm pretty sure there's a bit more to the process than just plugging it into the wall.
Actually, I thought so too when I first heard about them as well. So, but it's not true. You just plug them in, and they pump power into your
really. It sucks out the power from the, and your system works out that it's taken that power from there, not there.
Yeah, I mean, yes. So it doesn't need to work it out. It's just the physics works out. Now, the people who are really alarmed about this are some of the the electricity safety sort of regulators, because it's not a particularly good idea to have your own, to pump power into your own home in that way, without and especially without sort of getting an electrician to do it. Apparently, they've done it lots. It's quite widespread in Germany, but where incidentally power prices are also extremely high, competitive with ours for being the highest. And people have sort of been. I think it's an act of desperation almost to try and shave off the last few pounds. But we have slightly different regulations here, and our domestic power installations work in a slightly different way, and so quite a few engineers are complaining that this may lead to obvious problems, fires, and electrocutions. Because one of the problems is if you don't know that a circuit is live, or if the circuit of the inverter on the solar panel malfunctions, it could be pumping mains voltage in, and you think you've turned it off, or someone changing a light bulb or something turns it off, and the circuit is live, and you obviously get a great big shock. So things of this kind can happen, but I think it just seems more like a Heath Robinson palliative rather than a real solution to the problems that people are experiencing. I mean, if you're stretched already to pay your bills, then going to Aldi to fork out an extra 500 quid in the hope that it might save you between 70 and 200 pounds a year seems already to be an irrelevant thing. So you either can afford the bills and the solar panels, or you can't afford either.
On that point, Ben, thank you for your time as ever. Ben Parle, co-founder of Climate Debate UK, with us on the programme. And like all of these things, if you are endeavouring to do something like solar panels on your roof, check with an electrician first. I certainly would. I wouldn't want to just plug something in to my mains. I'm sure that big companies would tend to have done their due diligence on all of that beforehand, you'd like to think. But that's what you do, isn't it? You just check it with the electrician fella and go, can that do anything? Is anything bad can come of this? And how much would you really save if you lobbed 3 panels on your roof and did it yourself and just plugged it into the mains? Is that free electricity? Does it give you 1% of your total bill? What sort of figures are we talking about here? If anyone can shine some light. And how does that differ, by the way, from those who've actually gone to an extraordinary lengths and spent, you know, tens of thousands or 10 grand, 15 grand on a solar panel unit where it's all fed into the system and reverts back to the electricity company? What's the difference between those two mechanisms? If you've got the solar panels and it's working out well, maybe you can shine some light. 0344 499 1000. We've also got the voice of doom coming next on Talk.
Nine, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just before we go any further, Voice of Doom. It's the mystery voice. Of course, this is day 4 of the newish voice. Very simple. You're looking for a politician, dead or alive, left or right. Who is this?
We didn't do that.
Let's hear that again.
We didn't do that.
And again.
We didn't do that.
87222. Don't phone, just message 87222. If somebody gets it correct, we will tell you after the news. If not, it rolls over until Tuesday. Here it is one more time.
We didn't do that.
87222. Back to the phones. Jakob in Milton Keynes. How you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm on Easter Holes. I'm a school teacher.
Yeah.
I miss the creatures of the night.
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah, you've been communicating for decades with us.
I have. I've got grey hair now. Well,
yeah,
a
well,
lot
you
of
and me
it's
both.
missing.
What do you got for us? Iran, what is going on?
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier it's Israel's war. I don't agree with that. I think it is our war as well, because you've got to remember that since the Islamic Republic was established in January 1979, they've been pitted against us. They've been on a war footing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they refer to America as the great Satan, and they refer to us as the little Satan.
Correct. So we are involved in it. Can Trump solve it, Jakob?
I'd like him to, because we imagine if this regime, which is an Islamic fundamentalist regime, is armed with nuclear weapons, totally dangerous for Israel, who are on the front line, and for us as well. Now, if they get regime change, if Pahlavi gets in there and have secular democracy, it's a win-win situation, because
well, it is, but we were told the nuclear capability was destroyed last year, and any remaining possibility has been destroyed this year. So it should be a straight road, shouldn't it, from now on?
Well, it should be, but we can't really trust the Iranian regime, can we?
But they're still there. That's the problem. They're still there. They're not going anywhere.
They're still there, and I think we owe it to the Iranians, because it's like rescuing the Germans from Nazism. Yeah. We need to rescue them from this vile dictatorship that they're living under.
I would totally agree. Jakob, I've got to step in there because of time. You've been brilliant. Great to talk again. Jakob in Milton Keynes. You want to get in touch and respond on that one. 0344 499 1000. True regime change in Iran. Is it likely to happen anytime soon? We'll be back with more of your calls in just a few moments' time. Right now, let's get the latest news at 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And and good afternoon. Yeah, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Loads to come in this hour. We'll continue to talk about the issue of lawless Britain. Marks and Spencer's giving Sadiq Khan both barrels, it seems, as being soft on crime after staff were attacked, and soaring retail violence and those recent Clapham riots. This is not just down there in London. There's other parts of the UK affected as well. Also this afternoon, widespread rail disruptions are expected this Easter bank holiday, with Northern, Transpennine Express, Avanti West Coast services affected by essential engineering works as roads and trains face their busiest weekend in 4 years. I do get it, OK? When do you fix the trains? It's got to be done sometime. Well, let's do it when people are off. But it's simultaneously a long weekend, so people go away. My local train, Southeastern, no trains from this station for the next 2 days. OK. Holiday weekend and all that. And oil prices have surged amid those war tensions in Iran. Brent crude jumping nearly 9%. This, of course, is spiking a hike in fuel costs. Diesel up 30%. Petrol at a 2-year high. More comment on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. And of course, we'll let you know this hour whether we have a winner on the Voice of Doom. Stand by for all of that. If you're messaging, it's 87222. Now, let's move back to the BBC. Outgoing DG Tim Davie has admitted the BBC's culture will never be fully fixed. Of course, this has come as another high-profile scandal forces an exit, deepening scrutiny of the corporation ahead of a major leadership reset. Can they ever get it right? Let's speak with John Mayer, former BBC producer and editor of How Do We Pay for the BBC after 2027. John regularly helps us out with these kind of stories. Nice to see you again, John. I mean, there is a sort of a short answer to this, isn't there? The BBC is absolutely massive, like the NHS, and any organisation that is that big is hard to control with a one-size-fits-all policy, and naturally you're going to have bumps in the road along the way. That's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for ineptitude, but it might explain what Tim Davie was talking about.
It's a supertanker, Ian. How do you turn a supertanker around? They've got 5,000 journalists, and journalists like you and I, we actually quite like a bit of mischief. So, we will do bits of mischief here, bits of mischief there. That's part of our DNA. So, but poor Tim, he's had 6 years and he's leaving it in a puff of scandal.
Yeah.
It was very sad. His trouble was that he didn't have a flak catcher. Right to the bitter end, he had nobody to catch his flak, so he took it all, and he did it badly. I mean, by the way, I've just edited a book called Letters to Matt Britton about what he should do. 25 letters to him about what he could do to actually correct things in the BBC. Look, you're dealing with egos, you're dealing with people on television, including you, and possibly me. We've all got egos. You have to have an ego to appear in front of a camera. You can't be a shrinking violet. And so that ego will have all sorts of sides to it. And there may be a bad side as well. But also there's this sense of entitlement. If you're a TV star, you're entitled. If you're a football star, you're entitled. No, you're not. You'll get found out.
Yeah, true enough. I have some sympathy with the BBC, of course. If it turns out that somebody who works for them, 20, 30 years ago did something bad, I don't think that you can necessarily blame the BBC. Sometimes there will be questions as to if the BBC knew something but still continued with either employment or certainly not even bothering to look deeper into a story. I understand that, as I would with any other employer. But I guess, the sheer size of it, the politicisation of it, or the accusation that it's politicised, people I always find it interesting when they talk about it being full of sizzling lefties, whereas somebody like Alistair Campbell, at the time of Brexit, called it the British Brexit Corporation because he felt that they were waving the flag for Nigel Farage too much.
I saw John Sopel the other day do a Spectator thing, and he said, look, if the BBC is so full of lefties, how come all of my colleagues in news that have left have gone to work for Tory Prime Ministers of the Tory party? Strange that, isn't it? You know, but you know, it isn't full of lefties. Believe me, I knew quite a lot of Tories in the BBC, and you know, the most read paper is the Daily Mail. It's not the Guardian.
No, indeed, and Tim Davie definitely wasn't a lefty, and if you look at the board, Robbie Gibb definitely isn't a lefty. You know, so I mean, there are, you know, that's always been a bit of a skew-if accusation, but it has at times made mistakes that leave it open to that accusation. Panorama being an obvious one.
Oh, that was an own goal. That was so stupid. That was production 101, wasn't it? You bolt two pieces together and you don't tell people. Come on, yeah. That was, and the BBC put hands up. But look, what they did wrong is they knew about it for 8 or 9 months before it came out. It came out via the Telegraph. You know, if you know about something, if you know you made a mistake, put your hands up. And my criticism of Tim, and indeed of Deborah Turness, is they never appeared in public and say, look, we made a mistake. We're very sorry. Yeah. We're trying not to do it again. You know, if you're a boss, you own up.
How do we just give us an overview, John, if you would, as to how you turn this oil tanker around?
Well, you employ fewer people for the start. So make them all aware that their job isn't there for life. And you know, if the license fee settlement comes out badly, they will employ fewer people. So you employ you employ less of a superstructure that doesn't work. You know, the BBC has huge numbers of people in editorial policy, whatever, you know, who are retired management consultants. Yeah. You know, trust your people, but also if they let you down, kick them out. You know, we never hear about people being fired. Who's been fired for the Glastonbury thing? Who's been fired for the BAFTA thing? You know, who's been fired for the Trump thing? You should have a sacrificial lamb and say, look, you did it, you're out.
Yeah, spot on.
And people know that.
Indeed. John, thank you for your time as ever. John Mayer, former BBC producer, editor of How Do We Pay for the BBC in 2027. I think it's its own worst enemy in many respects. It doesn't explain very well when things happen. A couple of good examples of that that I can just think of off the top of my head. So if I got asked tomorrow to make a film, as they call it, it's called an authored piece. So it's not a news piece, it's an author. So my opinion on something, if I think there are too many solar panels on houses that are making the aesthetics of family roads and estates unsightly. So the One Show have gone, great, we love that subject, go out and make a film on it, okay? So I do a film, it'll be a 4-minute piece, and Alex Jones on the One Show will go, and now solar panels are big at the moment, but they're not everybody's cup of tea. So here with a view on this is Ian Collins, and then they play my film moaning about the solar panels. Now, if you are a net zero evangelist, straight away you will say, the BBC are now claiming, or the BBC, so there was a reporter made a film about dogs, and it was a bit rubbish, but it was about dogs being, you know, not everybody likes a dog. Some people are scared of dogs, and be mindful when you're on your walk with the dogs. So this was seen by certain parts of social media as, well, this is clearly a Muslim thing. They've decided that because some people of that community don't like dogs, then they're going to put a piece out on their news. The BBC, look, they've reached a new low. You see, it's broadcast by the BBC, but it's not strictly, you know, how do we want the BBC to be? Do we want to just not have individual opinions on it? Now, during the news, you don't want it during the news. That's a whole different ballgame. I saw a journalist online, and it was terrible what they'd written. A woman had been the victim of a terrible sexual assault and rape. She had previously worked as a prostitute, this woman, and the piece on the BBC Online said former sex worker, and then her name, whatever it was. I think she had either been killed in this assault or had foregone her anonymity. I can't quite remember it. Former sex worker. Now, journalistically, editorially, you don't need to put that. It kind of sort of suggests that, well, if you do that for a living, you might have to expect this. It was really lousy. It was tasteless. And straight away I saw the same thing. The BBC have reached a new low. As if Tim Davie had got a meeting together and said, let's go. Oh, do you know what that was? That was somebody sitting in a newsroom at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, probably somebody quite junior, only connected to uploading web headlines, and they'd written it. Former sex worker. It was a terrible piece of journalism, and it was taken down again. But the point is, it's not the BBC. We have to blame the BBC, but when you break it down, there are individuals that work at the BBC, and that's the problem. So individuals should be called to account. We never see anybody fired. I mean, the Panorama thing is the most confusing, horrendous thing I think I've ever seen in terms of a blunder since I've done this job, 30 years, whatever. I can't think of anything that is so blatant and so journalistically troubling, almost from a journalist, but almost criminal journalistically, that could land the BBC with a multi-billion-pound fine, by the way. I'm not aware, no one's ever explained that story to me. I genuinely, not just because I do this for a living, and I know what an edit suite looks like, I know what a production team looks like, I know the process. I think there are other people outside of my industry that would be quite intrigued to know what happened there. Did somebody make this and everyone in the room went, yep, that's fine? And has anybody been fired for that? There must have been a person that signed that particular part of the Panorama documentary off. There must have been. Where are they? Are they still there? What happened? We don't know. Similarly with that iffy headline, we don't know. When a bloke was talking about the fear of dogs, and people were talking about as if it was the headline on the 9 o'clock news. Somebody at the BBC should have gone, mate, it was just a bloke who was asked to give his opinion. He's a reporter who did an authored piece. It's all of that. The BBC are bloody hopeless at doing this stuff. They have no credibility because the size of it, because not necessarily, it's not because it's crammed with sizzling lefties. It's because it's run by sizzling idiots. That seems to be the main problem with the BBC. 0344 499 1000. Michael in Birmingham. Back to our calls. Lawless Britain, Michael. What's going on?
Yeah, hi Ian.
Hi.
Happy Good Friday.
You too.
I've seen loads of worshippers walking around Birmingham today. Just out of interest. Yeah, none of them women and none of them carrying a crucifix.
No.
But anyway, we'll park that one. But there are hundreds of them. But what I was going to say is your definition of Trump derangement syndrome, by the way, it's not about anybody that criticises Trump. It's about people that criticise Trump for anything. Like 2 rainy days is Donald Trump's fault.
Yeah, true.
People that screamed into cameras for 5 days, you know, after he'd been elected. And where are those people that said that they felt their life was in danger on his inauguration? But perhaps they're having quite a nice Easter now.
Kind of interesting that, wasn't it? You know, I literally fear for my life if he gets... it's like, calm down, it's Donald bloody Trump, for goodness sake, you know.
Yeah, but going back to the lawlessness, the Clapham stuff and all of that, I don't think it's innocent at all. I mean, going back to Study in America and YouTube stuff, I think that the police should be digging into what caused that social media gathering, who was behind it, really. I don't think it was a bunch of guys thinking, yeah, in it, let's go down Clapham in it and go and jack M&S or whatever.
In it.
You know, because, you know, in some of these kind of like insurrection things in America, they found, you know, breeze block was delivered and randomly dumped on pavements at various points and all of that. And I think what there's some political stuff behind it, which are testing the authorities as to how far they can go and get away with and what the appetite to stand up is. And they're finding out there is zero appetite to stand up, by the way. And it's partly because of the it's only culture. You and I discussed it a few weeks ago when there was when Reform announced let's ban face coverings. Oh, they're only face coverings. Yeah, but face coverings lead to other things. It's only this. It's only a spliff. It's only this. But then normally, you know, when you join the dots together, it's only a face covering leads to somebody going shoplifting. People that go shoplifting then move on to burglary. People that do burglary then move on to street. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's like, you know, but I think there's something behind this kind of like social media stuff, which isn't a bunch of lads just getting together and thinking, let's go and do something in Clapham, and also in Solihull, which I didn't know about until the other day, and that's just down the road.
Yeah, anyway, I didn't know that to start with. It was only when I realised this had happened elsewhere. There was a couple of other places too.
Yeah, and makes me wonder if there's something, you know, that didn't get the coverage that it might have done. It was only after Clapham that I heard that there'd been something already put in force in Solihull, which, again, wasn't aware of it.
Wasn't aware of it. 2 miles away from me. But anyway, look, happy Easter, Ian. Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend, Michael. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one comes in that says, why aren't the kids being arrested in Clapham or stop and search for looted property, especially the face recognition? Is it due to the majority of yobs being black? No, I think it's due to the majority wearing balaclavas. I don't think, I know there's this accusation of two-tier policing. I don't think in this case they thought, right, this is a heavily non-white area, so therefore we'll leave it. I don't think you could... There were arrests, by the way, but I don't think you would identify anyone who's wearing a balaclava. That then starts the whole argument about whether face coverings and hoodies should be allowed in public. Brad says, don't forget, all of these delinquents running amok will have the vote. Thanks to Starmer. Yes, 16, and you can vote. Is that a good idea at 16? Voting? I think we all know the answer to that, don't we? 0344 499 1000. Right, let's find out if we've got a winner on The Voice of Doom. Around about 25 minutes ago, this is the voice we played you.
We didn't do that.
Very simple question. Who is that? Who does that voice belong to? These are some of the guesses. Keir Starmer. Obviously not. Nigel Lawson. No. Carl Turner. No. Ed Miliband. No. Brian Walden. Can we just hear the voice again?
We didn't do that.
Brian Walden. It is not Brian Walden. We don't have a winner. No one got it right. It's back on Tuesday because we're off on Monday. Tuesday, Voice of Doom continues. More from you on the way. 3:20. This is Talk.
RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Back to your calls. Colin in Glasgow. Colin, how are you doing?
I'm good, Ian. How are you?
Very good, thank you. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on this lawlessness in Britain, I kind of think that we're now seeing the sort of repercussion of our own actions, and the people that have educated children to know and realise what their rights are. It's a kind of reflection of this human rights thing that we need to come out of to get rid of people coming into the country.
Yep.
It's people know far too much information about where the boundaries are, and they're taking the boundaries far too far beyond that. It's almost like I know what my entitlement and my rights are, and we're seeing the repercussions of that just now.
I think we are. We're definitely the entitlement. I know my rights. The lack of a fear of any consequences. Colin, was there a tipping point though? Was there a point when it went from everything's fine to everything's not fine, or was it a kind of gradual thing?
I think it's been a gradual thing. I think it's been. I think the internet has a massive part to play in absolutely everything. With people being able to look up the internet and think that they know the rules for absolutely everything, the answers to absolutely everything. I think that it's put out too much information. People seem to, and especially kids, seem to be able to take that on board and kind of suggest that, you know, they're above and beyond what people were before. People were frightened to make moves before because they didn't know what the parameters were. It's too blatantly obvious for kids these days, you know, that the policeman can't touch me, nobody can touch me, teachers can't touch me, I don't get into trouble for anything, I don't get... there's no rules for them to live by now. As with likes of religion declining in this country or this nation, basically people don't have rules to live by and morals and principles. Even after COVID, that seems to have gone further out the window, where people are more interested in thy mind, thyself, over everybody else.
It is that relationship that some of those kids, I mean, obviously not all kids, you know, if a police officer stopped one of my kids, they would be absolutely in bits, you know. So,
100%,
but there is definitely a big contingent of kids who, I mean, their view of the police is extraordinary. You know, when you see a police officer having trouble because they're on their own momentarily and there's 20 kids around them, and there's adults filming it, and you think, hang on, why is an adult not helping the copper? Isn't that what you do? But the adults are shouting to the kids, go on, get stuck in, boys, you know, and you think, really?
Yeah, well, also the fact that nobody would want to get involved because if you were to touch a child, then their parents would probably be able to prosecute them for touching the child. So it's I was going to swear there, but it's kind of
no. I know where I know where you're coming from. Great stuff, Colin. Great call.
All right.
Have a lovely weekend. Thank you, Colin in Glasgow. On panels, Dave says little panels won't boil a kettle. Says Dave in Dorset. Well, yeah, but you see, I think, it's mean to little, because the little panels, I don't know anything about the little panels. Got a funny noise, haven't we, coming out of a microphone? It's that. That's better. The little panels, are going to be sold. They're plug-in panels. That's apparently the whole deal. Plug-in panels that are going to solve the problem. 0344 499 1000. This in from Stuart. It says, afternoon, Ian. So President Trump is, in his own words, with his pathetic, woke, left-wing, traitorous allied governments like Starmer, Labour Party, doing and offering nothing other than criticism. So I think let Trump and the Americans, who are the only ones with any balls, get on with it. And whatever happens, the woke, cowardly European governments can deal with it. I mean, I know, I do get that, although we are probably the only country who's doing something in terms of allowing aircraft carriers now. I know it didn't happen, and that's when the real damage was done, wasn't it? The hiatus between saying, we don't think you can use our land, but now you can. But the damage in terms of the relationship was ingrained in that chasm of time. But I don't think anyone else is really doing much at all. We are sending intelligence people there as well. But in fairness to all those other countries, it wasn't their war. It wasn't their war. It was a war that America gave no one any notice of, and there was no details ahead of time. So it's very hard for countries to suddenly go, yeah, we're on board. And, of course, we've all been stung by a bit of Iraq. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back with Martin in just a few moments' time. I'm just going to change a microphone because it's playing up for us. Keep it here. It's 3:30-ish. It's Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 3:30, and we're all sounding crisp and clear now. Martin in Bristol. Martin, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi,
Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Great show.
Thank you.
It's just basically to talk about the lawlessness in this country.
Yes.
Me being an old 70-year-old living down here in Bristol, which you can probably tell by the accent, I can remember a distinct change in the youth when we were, like, parents were, their ability to discipline their children was to a degree taken away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bigger one is technology. I think the likes of Google and WhatsApp. I mean, the kids today are so keyed up on everything. They know everything. They can go on Google. They can find out what the laws, states, what parents can do, what the police can do to them. I think that's got an awful lot to do about it. And for me, I think we're a lost loser. I don't think there's an awful lot we can do about it now because we are where we are.
So it can't ever be reversed? Do we have to wait for a new kind of a solar eclipse or something? What have we got to hang around for? Is it a new government?
I would have thought so, but the thing is, how do you control the technology?
Yeah, well, that's true.
How do you stop a 16-year-old going on Google?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is a school of thought, Martin. It sounds a little bit conspiratorial, but with artificial intelligence and all that goes with it, there won't really be any crime because it can all be cut off before anybody could commit it.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, well, you put digital ID and AI together. That's apparently the theory. Listen, Martin, I've got to run because we've got to get to our next guest. But thank you very much indeed for that. Have a cracking weekend, Martin in Bristol. So, what have we? It's a bank holiday. What does that mean? Rail disruption. Travel chaos, yeah, and widespread on the rails as well expected this Easter. Northern, Transpennine Express, Avanti West Coast services affected by essential engineering works as roads and trains face their busiest weekend in 4 years. There's only one person to speak to on this. Simon Calder, travel correspondent at The Independent, of course. Afternoon to you, Simon. Look, I sort of get it and I sort of don't. Bearing in mind it's a bank holiday weekend, people might want to go away somewhere with the family. Why would you do all that engineering work then?
Very good question. And talking to Network Rail, as I have done down the decades, they always say, look, if people are not commuting to work, that immediately lifts a very large number of passengers out of potential problems. But we've got to do it at some stage, and this, we calculate, is the least damaging. Having said that, Ian, of course, if you are just an occasional train user, maybe you just go and see family in northwest England from London or southern Scotland or whatever, and every time you try to do it, you find out that the trains are all messed up. That's going to put you off, and that's not going to be a great thing. But at the moment, it's really what does the least damage. And just to remind everyone, if you are travelling on the West Coast Main Line, that the bottom 50 miles from Milton Keynes Central to Euston is out of action. It's actually this weekend going to be easier to get to the moon and beyond it than it is to get to Milton Keynes if you're starting in London. Yeah. And so you have the issue of the rail engineering works, which is taking place not just on that really crucial stretch of one of the world's busiest intercity rail routes, but also they're doing various other bits of work during the weekend in places like Warrington to Wigan, also Preston to Oxenholme for the Lake District, then anywhere north from Carlisle on the West Coast Main Line going towards Glasgow with the branch to Edinburgh. Those are all going to be closed as well. Elsewhere in the country, it's not actually looking that bad in terms of planned engineering works. There's some stuff going on in West Yorkshire between Huddersfield, through Huddersfield, and also between Leeds and York via Garforth. So wherever you're going, do check. Winchester to Southampton closed, Herne Bay to Ramsgate, and Kings Lynn to Cambridge. But it's the West Coast Main Line that's the most crucial. And I'm afraid Storm Dave is on the way. And as a result, we are already seeing delays and cancellations. Particularly Transport for Wales says it's going to be really tough. So any travel you're planning to do later in the evening on Saturday or on Sunday morning, that could be disrupted. Caledonia McBrain, who, as you know, do the ferries in Scotland to the Western Isles, they are in all kinds of disarray. They're really several ships short of where they need to be to run a fuel service, and on top of that they've got weather disruption, so that's looking fragile.
Indeed. So you've got the weather, you've got the trains, and people might go, I tell you what I'll do, we're just going to take the car. And then you go, oh no, I can't afford to take my own car because petrol is off the flipping scale. If you've got a diesel, you might as well take out a loan before you visit the petrol station. I mean, it's pretty grim on the roads.
Oh, it certainly is. And there will be people listening now who are in really quite tough jams. And the news or the advice from the motoring organisations is start before 10 o'clock in the morning, try and complete your journey by 10 in the morning, or go earlier in the day, earlier in the evening, so maybe 5 o'clock, 6, 7 o'clock, start your journey then. But it's just right now, I'm just looking out the window, a long old traffic jam, and that's as was predicted. And the trouble spot, so tomorrow's going to be the same. Try and complete your journey by 10 or set off after 5 in the afternoon. And then Easter Sunday, relatively quiet, as it always tends to be in my experience. But then April
Monday.
Easter Monday bank holiday.
Yeah.
That's going to be really busy, particularly people coming back from Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, north on the M5 going towards Bristol, and around, of course, the M25, particularly from Heathrow to the M1 junction.
I'm a big fan of the advice you just gave, Simon. There are some problems with it, and that leave early thing, because I've done it on a flight before. I was going to southern Spain for just a weekend break. I was on Matod as well. I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get, and it was freezing over here. And I was going off to the mid-20s temperatures, and I was very excited. And I thought, I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to get on the earliest flight. I think it's about 6 a.m. to Malaga, something like that. So first flight of the day. Two problems. One is I was also on with a stag crew. So there was about 30 of them, and I'm sat in the middle. They kind of adopted me almost, but I certainly wasn't drinking what they were drinking. But the problem is when you're early, so I arrive in Malaga about 9 o'clock in the morning. Of course, I can't check into the hotel till 3 in the afternoon, so I'm standing there in a Canada Goose in Malaga, a Canada Goose in Porto Banús. I mean, it was a ridiculous situation. So there is a limitation with starting early if you can't check into your hotel.
Oh yes,
take flip-flops.
Yeah, you got your Canada Goose in Puerto Banús, very nice there.
Yeah.
But you just leave the case and the Canada Goose at the hotel, and you just go off and explore. For goodness sake, you're in Spain. It's the morning, the sun's shining. There's loads to see, loads to do, and come back to your hotel later.
Go to a bullfight or something, if you have to. I'm not recommending that, by the way. On that point of flights, it's probably never lost on you, Simon. You've been doing this forever, as I have, doing what I do forever as well. We talk about recessions, we talk about cost of living crisis, and yet you go to the airports, the flights are rammed, the slots are absolutely chock-a-block. You can look at even a sort of a standard hotel, whether you're going to do the typical kind of let's go to Spain or Cyprus or somewhere that's sort of European kind of holidays, and you discover they're all completely booked out. So not everybody. I scratch my head on this and think, well, firstly the cost of living crisis. These aren't all rich people going on holiday, of course.
No. OK, so what's happening right now, Ian, is that there is a huge appetite for Spain and Portugal because they are in the west of Europe. They are seen as being safe and reliable in a way that perhaps Cyprus, Turkey and Egypt are not. Now, having said that, not only would I very happily book a holiday to Turkey or Cyprus or Egypt right now, I've actually done that. I've got a nice next month, nice 40 quid ticket, Luton to Larnaca, to Larnaca in Cyprus, which I'm very much looking forward to. And yeah, if you are prepared to go to places which are less fashionable, that's all I'll say about them at the moment, you are going to be able to lock in some really good deals. One other aspect, and I've had so many people talking to me this weekend about it, which is, are we going to run out of aviation fuel? Which would really take the shine off your holiday if you get no further than Luton Airport.
Especially if you're mid-flight.
Look, aviation is incredibly safe, and long may it remain so. We're already seeing around the edges airlines such as Skybus, little airline based in Cornwall. They've cut their link between Newquay and London Gatwick Airport, and on top of that, the airline Origny from Guernsey, they've consolidated quite a lot of their flights. So, for instance, I have one from London City to Guernsey, and guess what? I'm now going from Gatwick, and they'll have one full plane instead of two half-empty ones. The bigger airlines, unlikely to be doing anything different for a while. All the chief executives tell me that, we're fine for the month of April. After that, if there's still a supply problem, then things could start getting tricky.
Tricky and more expensive, of course, but much like the forecourts. Listen, Simon, have a great weekend, whatever you're up to. Great to have you on as ever. Simon Calder, travel correspondent, travel editor at The Independent. Thank you to him. He knows a thing or two about that stuff. Mickey messaged me on X, said, do you really wear a Canada Goose on an aeroplane? No, I made up the Canada Goose thing for creative effect, OK? I didn't really go in a Canada Goose to Malaga. But I did go clothed, and I did arrive in about 28 degrees temperatures, and I couldn't check into the hotel. But of course, I had my suitcase with us. I whipped out a pair of shorts and stuff. But it is. If you go to, somebody went to Centre Parks, I know, and I think you can check in a bit earlier at Centre Parks. I can't remember what the time is, but they did the same thing. Got there about like 8 in the morning. I don't even think the thing was open on board. Something like that. And there was nothing really to do other than sit in the car with the kids until they could get into the car park or whatever it was. So. Yeah, great to leave early. Depends, however, on where you're going. Back to your calls and comments. Loads coming in. Robert's in Hertfordshire. On Lawless Britain. Robert, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. I mean, I'm in my 70s. When I first went to school, I was, I'm not saying it's right. We was caned. Your mum and dad was allowed to give you a clip round the ear roll. The local copper will give you a clip round the ear roll. Now, if you went home and told your dad, you got another one for getting the first one.
I'm surprised kids had any ears.
Nah, I was actually caned in front of the whole school. The whole school. Wow. I was caned. Oh yeah. Do you know what? Do you want to know what for?
Go on.
I was a black marketeer.
So you were selling iffy goods in the playground?
No, I was selling Fruitney cigarettes. Right. So I'd go to the local shop, buy 20 cigarettes, sell them for threepence each, cut for all the coupons as well. So not only did I make a tidy sum, I've got a Bex Bissell carpet cleaner as well. Well, what I'm saying in all seriousness, it was wrong, and there was some brutal teachers, but they've never been allowed. It's never been replaced. And, during my time at school, it actually changed. Because when I first went there, it was very, very strict. If another teacher walked into the classroom, you all had to stand up.
Yeah.
And my teacher did wear a cloak, not a mortar, but a cloak. Then in the 60s, it was the trendy drama teachers come, and you was allowed to call them by their first name. And they wore corduroy shoes and sat on the corner of the desk. Yeah, no, but it did
with an
change.
Unsightly beard, and that was just the women teachers, right?
That was Mr. Hardy. Right? That's right. But they was cool. Everything was cool, man.
Yeah. I remember when I was at primary school. You just reminded me of this. We had a teacher. I can't remember his name now. It might have been Mr. Barford, which is slightly unfortunate, a bit too close, isn't it? Mr. Barford, who decided to reintroduce the standing up when another teacher walked in the class. He wasn't an old guy himself. In fact, he was quite a young teacher looking back at it. But he'd obviously realised that a couple of generations ago, people used to do exactly what you've just described. If a teacher walked in the class, everybody stood up. My mum told me about that. And he reintroduced this. Now, I don't know. I think he did this autonomously. Certainly wasn't happening in other classes. And so for a whole year, a school year, we did that. Every time somebody walked in, up we stood. It was a bit... I don't think we knew really what was going on or why we were standing up.
But, we
just did it like little meerkats.
Okay, yeah. But I still think it was respect. I mean, everybody... I had a Saturday job.
No, I get that.
Everybody had a Saturday job or a paper round. I know you're not allowed to do that now. But there was... I come, from pleases and thank yous. If I see a neighbour walking along the street, I would offer to carry her bag. Now you wouldn't do that. Your mum used to bend over and clean the doorstep. I used to have to keep the lift open while my mum mopped the lift out. It's just a different.
I was about to say you had a house with a lift, but you mean you lived in some flats?
We lived in the council block of flats.
Okay, yeah, I've got it, yeah.
But like I said to you, there was some brutal teachers there. We did have one teacher, my form teacher, and I got him to thank for my interest in English literature.
Yeah.
He was a science teacher, so he used to get sent to his lab, and he'd send you outside, and he'd give you a book to read, and then he had all these questionnaires that you had to read it. So thanks to being naughty, I read Of Mice and Men, Animal Farm, Sided with Rosie, The Old Men and the Sea, and it was my love. And you couldn't get away from it. You have to sit outside his science lab, and then he'd give you this questionnaire. And all the books were short. I mean, you know, of Mice and Men is short.
Yeah.
So is Animal Farm.
Yeah.
But that's where I fell in love with books, and it's thanks to.
That's
so
great.
I used to be naughty on purpose.
You only I think a kid needs just a couple of those moments, don't they, at school where something ignites, and it's brilliant. My little boy is just he's 12, but he's just finished reading Animal Farm, and they did it for they did a test on it. They also had to read aloud part of it for a drama thing, whatever it was, and that's brilliant, because I didn't read Animal Farm until I was an adult. So it never. We did read of Mice and Men at school, interestingly, but I was quite proud that he's done. I thought, please make that be the start of a relationship with books, rather than screens.
Lord of the Flies as well. I mean, that was the one that we done for our exam. That was a fantastic book, and like especially with Animal Farm, it's about the Russian Revolution.
Well, I was going to say, I was trying. They did a thing. That was one of the questions. You know, what is a metaphor and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, this is great that if they're learning all of this, you know, it's not really about the animals. It's a wider. You know, they're making a greater point. It's political. It's all of that stuff. And I want, you know, I think he's ingested quite a lot of that. But it's, you know, what you want is for that kind of learning to stay. And, you know, they always say, don't they, about wayward kids, which is where we started this conversation about lawless Britain. If those kids had just something that fired them up. But, of course, you can't, in today's world, I think, Robert, to find something that's more attractive than monkeying around with your mates on social media, creating videos, live streaming, a shoplifting escapade. That is a potent drug for those. The endorphins and all the rest of it that are released as a result of that is greater than that of reading a book.
Well, you was frightened of your teacher, or wary.
Yeah.
There was respect there, and I think the fact that you're frightened of them is a form of respect. And I'm not saying that's right. And like I'm saying to you, they took it all away very, very quickly. You're not even allowed. I remember. My wife Linda, she went to smack my boy. He's in his 40s now, and he said, "If you touch me, I'll have you nicked." That's from.
There you go. We live in changing times and all that. Listen, Robert, you're brilliant as ever. Great call. Thank you, Robert in Hertfordshire. 0344 499 1000. It is true that good strict teachers, because you could have strict teachers who were quite miserable, but then you had strict teachers that were also, you know, on a good day, they could make you laugh, and they were engaging, and they were really good teachers. And I reckon most of us would say, actually, the strict teachers were the best teachers, because you did learn. You know, we had some hopeless teachers. We had some brilliant ones. We also had some horror shows, you know, particularly the, what do they call the supply teacher, isn't it? You know, suddenly you walk into your classroom, there's somebody you've never seen in your life standing at the day, thinking, who is this person? They were tricky moments. More tricky for the teacher, sadly. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
9, 8, 7, RS 25 inches, lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's get back to it. Brian is down in London. Kevin O'Sullivan's here, by the way, in a few minutes. Kevin, Brian, how you doing?
I'm very good, and how are you?
I'm very good. What are your thoughts? Lawless Britain, where has it all gone wrong?
Well, my view is I would love to be able to speak to a member of the government and ask them what they think would happen by making it known that you can steal anything up to £200 and have no consequences. Because basically that's what the government have told everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, what did they think was going to happen? On top of that, also, they know that, you know, now you go to these shops on the high street, there's a security guard on most of them.
Yes.
They also know full well that if the security guard lifts their finger or touches them, it is them that are going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
So basically, they know that they can walk in and steal £200.
Sure.
Or whatever stuff, and also no one's going to stop them. You know, and I felt it so embarrassing today when they issued the statement they were going to withdraw that sort of thing whereby you can now actually have consequences if you steal below £200. It's ludicrous, and that's not part of it.
Do you remember when, was it New York, wasn't it, that did the broken windows policy? That there was the... I think, actually, I might be confusing something there, but Bill Bratton was the chief cop. I think Rudy Giuliani, before he went nuts, was the mayor. And between the two of them, they just worked out, right, we're going to start nicking people for the small crimes, because if you do that, you begin the process of making things better. And for a while, it did work.
It worked for a long while. I used to go to New York quite a lot on work, and it was a terrible place in the 80s. It was a really rough place. And he brought in that zero tolerance. If you spat on the pavement, you get arrested.
Yeah.
All right. And for about 5 or 6 or 7 years, it actually made a big difference. It did make a big difference, and I think the problem has to start from ground, you know, at that level.
If a 16-year-old was arrested for spitting on the pavement, there would be probably a riot, wouldn't it? They'd go, well, he's got arrested. All he did was spit on a pavement, officer. It's like, no, you can't say all he did. That's a terrible thing to do.
No, absolutely right. And so people now have got to sort of accept the breakdown of society at that lower level, and it only will spread wider and wider. And also, of course, there are no police whatsoever on the streets. There's no one on the beat. So they've got freedom to do what they want. They've got freedom to steal £200, and they know full well any security guards can't touch them. Well, that is your open door to what's going on.
Indeed, yeah. Maybe we need to sort of somehow empower security guards a little bit, although I can see how that could end in tears, but you take the point. Well, Brian, listen, I've got to move, Brian, only because Kevin's just walked in the studio. Thank you to Brian down in London. Great calls this afternoon. Just to remind you, of course, it is Easter weekend, which means things do change a little bit in some respects on the schedule. So I'm not here on Monday, but on Monday, sitting in this chair at 1 o'clock, it's going to be, and Alicia, our producer, is just going to tell us.
You're not sure, are you?
Is it Mark? Oh, it's Mark Dolan.
Yeah, OK.
Good old Mark. Mark's there. Kev's
worth tuning in on Monday, then.
Yeah, absolutely.
OK.
Yeah, that's right. Unusual, really, for this slot.
Yeah, look, this is one of the Easter eggs that we will be Can anybody see this?
Is that the actual egg?
There you go.
Is that
This is a Hotel Chocolat one. There's a bigger one we've got.
Is
out
the
there.
egg inside that shell?
Yeah. And there's a bigger one out there that we've got that's 90 quid. 90
Really?
Quid. But there's one Easter egg. That's our most expensive. We've got a whole selection we're going to go throughout the show.
Yeah. Well, I need to know.
This is going to be the world record chocolate consumption.
What happens to those Easter eggs? Because I've played this game. We did it with mince pies one Christmas. We had 10,000 mince pies.
Well,
but
what happens is I take them all home and sell them to my neighbours.
Of course you do.
We've got a 90 quid one, but there's one Easter egg on sale this year that's £390. 390 quid. So we're going to be trying some of these. Also, we're going to talking of Easter.
Yeah.
Big controversy going on. The King has not delivered an Easter message.
No, he hasn't.
He did last year. He's decided not to this year. I would have thought